Chapter 931. Target confirmed. The attackers are demons. They're coming. Demons are coming from 2 different directions. 12 o'clock. The lookouts of each squad took turns to observe the targets with their naked eyes and telescopes. Alarms rang out one after another. Fishball fixed his eyes on the second group of demons according to the shooting area. The demons were as small as a leaf in the wind. Only when they flapped their wings could Fishball be sure that they were not ordinary birds. According to the training procedure, Fishball set the targets in the shooting circle and adjusted the course indicator on the sighting device. The new sighting device on top of the machine gun looked very strange. It had 2 parallel rings, one of which was a Devil Beast model that could rotate around. In the other ring, there were several small holes that were placed side by side. As long as the model was moved, the holes would also rotate. Although Fishball knew nothing about the working principle of the sighting device, he knew that it was designed by His Majesty. As long as it was related to His Majesty, it must be very effective. Therefore, he spent the whole night memorizing every step before shooting. The first step was to move the course indicator, which was the Devil Beast model, to a position parallel to the direction of the target. In this way, the enemies would overlap with the small holes in the shooting circle. Then he glanced at the model and shouted to his teammate, "A quarter." The ratio of the target to the model was 4-to-1, which meant that the demons had entered the effective shooting range of the Mark I HMG. Scholar of Dispersion Star, who assisted Fishball during the training, had repeatedly emphasized that such a visual result was not accurate, and could only roughly estimate the distance of the enemies. Therefore, to ensure that the bullets could cover the enemy's path, they had to report it in a larger range. Fishball knew this very well. If he fired early, he could always hit the target, but if he fired late, it would be a waste of bullets. After completing this step, all he had to do was wait for his teammate to report the result of the lookup table, and then pull the trigger. Although this series of actions had only taken a few breaths of time, he felt as if he had gone through a long period of tempering. The surrounding shouts were getting further and further away from him, and for a moment, he could even hear his own rapid heartbeat and breathing. The slightly wet and slippery feeling in his hand told him that the timid Fishball had not left him. However, this made him even more determined. The demons were still approaching the city wall at a fixed speed and slowly increasing their height, as if they wanted to repeat the trick they had used 5 days ago. The Devil Beasts were at least 800 or 900 meters away from each other. The bodies of the Devil Beasts were as thin as a piece of paper. Even the sharpshooters of the precision shooting team would find it difficult to hit the flying enemies. But they were different. Fishball didn't understand a word of the many principles the scholar had explained, but he remembered one thing very clearly. If the enemy approaches within the throwing distance, you can shoot at them directly. But before that, you won't be sniping the enemy. Instead, you'll be spraying enough bullets on the enemy's path, and waiting for them to run into you. Use the 5th hole. Just then, his teammates shouted from behind him. Fishball took a deep breath, raised the muzzle, and inserted the mad demon he was aiming at into the 5th round hole. Then he pulled the trigger as hard as he could. The muzzle of the gun spat out flames. The ear-piercing sound of gunfire made time flow again. Almost at the same time, several other squads also opened fire, and the entire top of the wall instantly boiled over. Fishball had to admit that it was a strange feeling. The muzzle of the Mark I model was not aimed at the demons, but at an obviously empty area. No one knew whether they could hit the target or not. Therefore, the only thing the machine gunners could do was to hold the trigger anxiously and expectantly, pouring out all the bullets in the box. Fortunately, it didn't take long. After about a breath's time, an eye-catching red flower suddenly burst out from the group of demons at the 12 o'clock position. Along with the red flower were half of a wing and splashed pieces of flesh. The Devil Beast that was hit by the bullets suddenly rolled on the ground, as if it had turned from a thin piece of paper into a crumpled rag. Until then, Fishball could roughly see the appearance of the enemy. He didn't find any trace of the mad demon among the scattered objects. Apparently, the first enemy to be shot down was a carrier carrying a bunch of red mist cans. 2 more Devil Beasts deviated from their course and fell to the ground like stones. Judging from their appearance, it was impossible to tell whether they were fleeing in a hurry or if they were seriously injured. However, they did not fly again until they crashed into the grass. Seeing this, the soldiers, who were greatly encouraged, burst into loud cheers. Another one. Good job, buddy. Anti-aircraft unit, it's your turn now. Come on, kill all those bastards. Long live His Majesty. The demons seemed to have sensed that something was wrong. Their orderly formation suddenly scattered, but they didn't retreat at all. Instead, they sped up and rushed toward the city wall. 3/4. Fishball grasped the gun handle tightly and kept adjusting the shooting direction. No 4/4. It was as big as the model, which meant that the enemy also had the ability to fight back. Fire at will. The lookout shouted. Everyone, fire at will. The comrades with revolving rifles also joined in the shooting. The sound of gunfire on the city wall suddenly echoed. Although 1/3 of the 12 devil beasts had been shot down, the enemy's accuracy began to drop sharply after they obviously took evasive measures. Just then, Fishball saw a devil beast gliding in an arc and diving straight toward him from the sky. As the deformed monster roared, he vaguely saw the mad demon on its back raise its bone spear, which seemed to be pointing at him. A chill instantly rose from the soles of his feet, and his hands could not help but tremble in fear. The figure of the demon had become even bigger than the model, so he didn't have to estimate the distance anymore. For the Markai Type 1, this distance was almost equivalent to a straight line. As long as he raised the muzzle and aimed at the demon, he could shoot it full of holes. But at the same time, the bone spear would mercilessly pierce through his body. Run or die. The familiar feeling followed him like a shadow, as if the cowardly Fishball had already grabbed his hands. Ah! The next moment, Fishball roared at the top of his lungs. Go away, I'm not. At the same time, the barrel of the gun spewed out a deadly flame toward the demon. The bullets that were fired rushed towards the demon, tearing its muscles, shattering its bones, and finally piercing through it. The huge impact caused the demon's body to swell slightly, and the flying bullets stirred up its internal organs into a mess. The moment the mad demon was hit, it also threw the bone spear in its hand. The moment Fishball pressed the trigger, he knew what would happen to him. But he didn't loosen his fingers. Even if fear made him tremble like a sieve, he still didn't take that step. Bang! An almost transparent barrier suddenly appeared in front of Fishball and blocked the bone spears 3 feet away. The spears that hit the barrier shattered into pieces, but the barrier remained intact after a slight flicker. At this moment, Fishball suddenly came to his senses. A short-haired witch had appeared beside the battlement and blocked the attack with an incredible ability. Chapter 932. Sylvie, who had been observing the battle, finally heaved a sigh of relief. The demon's first round of spears did not cause any fatal damage like the last time. With the help of the witches from Sleeping Island, the bone spears were either blocked or inexplicably lost their accuracy. Only one spear hit a heavy machine gun, and the splashing debris temporarily silenced the unit. However, with such injuries, as long as the battle was over, Nana would be able to help the soldiers recover. The mad demons had to wait for their arms to recover for the next round of attacks, but the first army would not stop shooting. The longer the demons stayed within this distance, the higher the chances of them being shot down. The outcome was basically a foregone conclusion. The enemies seemed to be aware of this. With a loud horn, the devil beasts that had not been shot down turned around and began to speed up their escape to the west. Compared to the dazzling attack formation, the opponent's escape route was much clearer. During this process, another devil beast's wings were broken, and it fell into the concealing forest unsteadily. At this point, there were only 5 flying demons left, only 3 of which were carrying mad demons. Sylvie transmitted the information to the last ambusher through the sigil of listening, and they would also be the end of the entire battle plan. Copy that, Lightning. A familiar voice came from the other end of the sigil. I'm going. Please enjoy the performance of the great explorer. Be careful. Before she could finish her words, she heard the whistling of the wind. It was the signal of falling from the sky, and also the omen of the arrival of the Grim Reaper. The demons controlling the devil beasts would never have expected that someone would attack them from above. They were born with the advantage of attacking their enemies from the sky, but this time, they were facing a witch who came from above the clouds. Their advantage no longer existed. Lightning quickly increased her speed to the limit of the windproof goggles. 120 kilometers per hour. It was almost twice as fast as Maggie in her devil beast form. If she went any faster, the violent airflow was likely to directly overturn her goggles. What she needed to do was the same as when she bombed King City. She just needed to adjust the direction and throw the bomb at the flying demons. But this time, the bomb she was carrying was Ashes. The addition of the extraordinary was a last-minute decision. As Ashes could only control the stone of flight to move up and down, she could not fight alone. It would be a waste to leave her on the ground, so she simply let the little girl carry her. This operation was surprisingly smooth. Ashes, who could float in the air on her own, did not burden Lightning at all. At the same time, her extraordinary physical fitness also allowed her to fly at high speeds without being affected at all. After passing through the thick layer of clouds, the scenery in front of the two suddenly became clear. The 5 demons that Sylvie had pointed out also came into view. Until this moment, they still hadn't noticed the abnormality above their heads. Lightning threw Ashes at one of the demons with all her might. The latter unsheathed its long sword and pounced straight at the demon's mask. Hearing the whistling sound of the sharp blade cutting through the air, the demon finally reacted, but it was too late. It swelled its arms and raised the bone spear horizontally, trying to block the witch's attack. But under the unstoppable slash of Ashes, the long sword not only broke the spear shaft, but also went all the way down in the same direction, splitting the helmet, head, and torso into 2. The last image left in the demon's sight was the pair of golden eyes of the extraordinary. The remaining demons screamed in fear. They pulled away from the left and right sides and raised their bone spears at the same time. They did not seem to care about the masterless devil beast at all. However, at this moment, a bone-chilling roar attracted their attention. Roar, roar. The giant devil beast that Maggie had incarnated finally rushed out of the clouds and swooped down toward the demons. Compared with Ashes, who had amazing fighting power, the demons finally focused on the larger Maggie. This could not be a real devil beast, because she was carrying a witch on her back. The 2 spears flew out of the demon's hands and 2 ghostly shadows shot at Maggie. But the next second, the devil beast disappeared without a trace. The 2 spears completely missed their target and did not even touch the skin of their target. In the place where the devil beast used to be, there was only a proud white pigeon left. Coo. In a split second, Nightingale had already landed in front of the demons. The strange characteristics of the misty world limited her movement in the air, so she could not come and go without a trace like on the ground. But when she was only a flash away from the enemy, the result was already decided. After that, Nightingale became the master of the battlefield. Without the god stone of retaliation, the demons could not even see where the enemy was. The narrow back of the devil beast was as wide as a square for Nightingale. While shooting the demon with the revolver, she did not forget to pull the reins and fly toward another devil beast that had fallen into a daze. The remaining mad demon made its last struggle. Ignoring the consequences of paralyzing its arm, it continuously threw 2 bone spears at Nightingale. The shining blue magic stone not only drained its magic power, but also withered half of its body. However, Nightingale did not even dodge. She turned the black and white world upside down and turned the sky into the ground. Then, she stood on the belly of the devil beast and let it take all the attacks. Not only that, but the rolling misty world also made them lose track of each other. Caught off guard, the 2 devil beasts suddenly collided with each other. The misty world instantly shrouded them. This was a world that the demon had never stepped into before. The distorted light and shadows made it momentarily forget to fight back. By the time it regained its senses, the silhouettes that were as thin as silver threads had rolled up like the waves of the sea, covering the sky and covering the earth, pressing down on it. When the enemy appeared again, both the flying devil beasts and the mad demons had become pieces of scattered flesh. Maggie turned back into a giant beast and easily caught Nightingale. On the other side, Ashes, who had just killed her mount, was also pushed over by Lightning. 2-1, it's my win, Nightingale said to the extraordinary and made a gesture of 2. Ashes shrugged and did not comment. After the 4 of them landed steadily, Lightning took out the sigil of listening from her satchel and asked, Sylvie, can you find the other 2 escaped devil beasts? After a short silence, Wendy said. Yes, I saw them. They are about 5 miles northeast of you. Very good. Please guide me in the right direction later. Do you want to go alone? And Maggie? Don't worry. Lightning patted her chest. They are just 2 ownerless beasts. None of them can run away, coo. Maggie turned back into a pigeon and flew over the little girl's head. She raised her head and said, Pay attention to the gas tanks that contain the red mist. Don't stick to them, Nightingale said. If you encounter new enemies, remember to retreat immediately, Ashes added. Got it. Leave it to the explorer. Lightning gave a thumbs up and then took Maggie into the air and chased after the fleeing enemies. Chapter 933. An hour and a half later, Roland, who had been waiting by the telephone, finally received the last report. Nightingale and the others who were responsible for the ambush not only did not let a single demon escape, but also seized a bunch of gas tanks that stored red mist. In addition to the enemies swept down by the air defense squad and the mad demon that Leaf had captured in the misty forest, this defensive battle could be said to have achieved an unexpected harvest. First of all, the most important thing was to restore the morale of the First Army. Although the enemy was not as easy to deal with as the Night Regiment or the demonic beast Tide, at least they had the strength to fight back. Moreover, the demons in the legends were not as powerful and unpredictable as those in the ancient stories. They were still ordinary people, and once they were hit by firearms, their resistance was not much better than that of the God's Punishment Army. Secondly, with the captives, it was easier to carry out the propaganda work in Neverwinter. Roland believed that as long as the migrants saw what the demons looked like, their prejudice against witches would disappear. How could a monster that was so different from human beings, and could not speak the language, corrupt the witches from thousands of miles away, and turn them into the minions of the alien race? The final harvest was the enemy itself. Since the magic blood could not be preserved separately, and would quickly lose its vitality after the death of the host, he did not expect to use the enemy's blood to make new sigil. Unexpectedly, when Agatha was not back, Celine took the initiative to take the job of making sigil. According to her, Agatha was indeed the most outstanding in the entire Quest Society, but basic sigil making was a necessary knowledge for the official members of the Quest Society. In addition to the quality of the magic stone and the blood, the carving of the veins was also a major key. Although it was not as important as the first 2, for example, a straight line could be drawn with a wooden stick in an emergency. However, the delicate and even multi-segment veins could better display the effect of the magic stone. To achieve this, there was nothing more accurate than tentacles. Whether it was the sense of touch, strength, or quantity, tentacles had incomparable advantages over fingers. Hearing Celine's self-praise, it took Roland a while to reverse his endless thoughts. Fortunately, he could not see these deep thoughts through the mind communication. Otherwise he would not be able to clear his name even if he jumped into the Yellow River. Of course, this defensive battle did not bring good news. The Mark IHMG could only barely be used against air targets. Looking at the overall situation, it could be seen that the greatest damage to the demons was when the targets were close to the city walls. Since they did not expect to be attacked, the formation of the demons was divided into 2 groups. They were very close to each other and moved slowly, making them the most ideal targets. In the end, only 4 of the 12 devil beasts were shot down, and none of them were hit when they entered the range of the spears. Fortunately, the mad demon's best throwing distance was about 200 meters, and the Mark I's almost straight trajectory increased their accuracy. 3 devil beasts were killed one after another, and the rest of the demons gave up fighting and chose to retreat immediately. In other words, if the enemy's firing range had been a little further, or if they had advanced in a scattered formation from the beginning, this battle would undoubtedly have been much more difficult. After all, in the face of air power that could come and go freely, ground-air defense was inherently at a disadvantage. In the future, the only improvements that could be made to the Mark IHMG were to add protective steel plates, or simply make it look like a turret to ensure that it was invincible against the enemies in the air. At the same time, the production of the Mark IHMG could be further expanded to deal with the formal war after the arrival of the Bloody Moon. But Roland knew that without an air force that could also come and go freely, it would be impossible to really eliminate the threat of the devil beasts. But let's put this aside for the time being. He put down the quill in his hand and heaved a long sigh of relief. He had finally won. No matter how insignificant the victory was, it was the first air defense battle in human history to be won by firearms. Thinking of this, Roland ordered someone to call Bear of Mons over. Hold a celebration ceremony in the central square tonight. According to the standards of Victory Day, make it as lively as possible. This is also part of the publicity. Understand? Yes, Your Majesty, the old director said with his hand on his chest. 5 days after the celebration, Snaketooth received a letter from City Hall. Who knocked on the door just now? Tigerclaw asked in a daze. Isn't it off duty today? Don't worry, it's not the foreman. You can go back to sleep. Snaketooth returned to the low table and looked out of the window. At this time, the sky was just beginning to brighten, as if it was covered with a light blue veil. Although he was still sleepy when he was woken up, he was not sleepy at this moment. Looking at the red seal stamped with the wax seal of City Hall, Snaketooth vaguely guessed what was in the paper bag. Over the past year and a half, his living conditions had obviously changed. Since moving to Border Town, he no longer lived like a rat. Like most people, he began to support himself with his own hands. Before receiving his first full salary, he had thought that this would never happen. Exploitation, embezzlement, and arrears were just the most common tricks used by employers. As an outsider, he was the target of exploitation. However, to his surprise, his monthly salary was not only paid on time, but also without a penny less. In this way, the improvement of his living conditions could be accurately calculated. His monthly salary was 12 silver royals, so he could save more than 1 golden dragon in 9 months, which was also the cheapest price for the down payment of a house in the residential area of Neverwinter. If he took another job, this goal could be shortened a lot. Since he could calculate the days, he had expectations. His Majesty's promise was being fulfilled one by one, and he had more and more expectations. Snaketooth carefully opened the letter and poured the contents on the table. There were 3 pieces of paper of different colors and sizes. The first one was the thickest, about the size of a palm. There were only a few lines of words on it, but it made his heart skip a beat. This was undoubtedly the identity certificate of an official resident of Neverwinter. Compared with the temporary identity card, this piece of paper was wrapped in a layer of transparent hard film and looked very smooth. In addition to his name and date of birth, there was also a lifelike portrait on the card, which showed that it was Snaketooth himself. He had finally become a citizen of this city, a subject recognized by His Majesty. Snaketooth suppressed his excitement and turned his eyes to the second piece of paper. It was a notice. Since he could only attend night classes on weekdays, there were many paragraphs on it that he could not read fluently, but it was not a problem for him to understand the general content. Chapter 934. What's this? After some rustling, Tigerclaw came over yawning. A letter? Snaketooth quickly pushed Tigerclaw's face away for fear that his saliva would drip on the letter. What's wrong? You're not going to sleep? I'm hungry. I want to eat, Tigerclaw said, rubbing his belly. Then go boil some water and make me a bowl of oatmeal. Oh, Tigerclaw answered. You haven't answered me yet, Snaketooth said helplessly. It's an ID card and an offer letter. Oh. Tigerclaw's eyes lit up and he squeezed his way back to Snaketooth. He hooked his arm around Snaketooth's neck and shook him excitedly. City Hall finally issued you an ID card? Haha. This is worth celebrating. Why eat oatmeal? Let's go to the market and buy some dried fish and mushrooms to stew. I'm still saving money. I can lend it to you first, Tigerclaw said carelessly. You've been thinking about it for so long. How can you not have a good meal? Besides, what did you say the day I got my ID card? Now Snaketooth knew he had to agree. Tigerclaw was tall and strong, so he often worked as hard as 2 workers. He was even more motivated when he had enough food. Later, he was chosen by the foreman to be the model worker of the 3rd engineering team. Not only did he get a raise in salary, but he also received a bonus, which was enough for him to buy a house. As long as immigrants could get a stable place to live, they would be issued an ID card. Therefore, on the day Tigerclaw got his house key and ID card, Snaketooth not only urged him to prepare a sumptuous celebration meal, but also moved his bedding and clothes into his concrete house. "I know," he cried. "I'll go and buy them later, all right? Hey, it's a deal." Tigerclaw climbed back to the bed proudly and began to rummage for clothes. "By the way, what's that notice?" "An offer letter from the railway engineering team." Snaketooth took a deep breath. "I'm going to work in the barbarian land." "What?" Tigerclaw's hand stopped. "When did you apply for this? Why didn't you tell me before? What if you insist on coming with me? Won't there be no one to take care of this house? Who wants to go with you?" "No. Why should I go to such a dangerous place?" Tigerclaw raised his voice. "It's not like you don't know what happened in the city. There are demons there. For the past few days, the news of the demons attacking the city walls had caused a huge commotion. First, the alarms went off one after another, and then strange monsters fell into the city. Then, the celebration that was suddenly held that night caused everyone to be in an uproar. His Majesty had publicly announced the existence of the alien race's enemies, and emphasized that the so-called barbarian land was not uninhabited from the beginning. It was once inhabited by humans and had a very pleasant name, the Fertile Plains. It was only because of the continuous harassment from demonic beasts and devils that the humans gradually retreated to the current territory of the Four Kingdoms. Some of the fugitives formed the predecessor of the church. They painted the enemy as an omnipotent existence, and even linked the enemy with witches. This in itself was a frightening nonsense. It turned out that, although the demons were cunning and terrifying, they were not invincible. Neverwinter's victory was proof of this. In order to open up new territory and protect Neverwinter from being attacked, His Majesty decided to march to the barbarian land and take back the human homeland. His Majesty's speech caused continuous cheers, and the First Army took advantage of the situation to bring meat porridge and roast meat. The atmosphere in the square immediately reached its peak. In the following 5 days, people could hear people discussing this matter wherever they went, including the engineering team. The hottest topics were whether the demons or demonic beasts were more powerful, and whether Neverwinter should expand to the northwest. At the same time, City Hall announced a series of recruitment announcements, one of which was to go to the Misty Forest to build the railway. Snaketooth did not care about the answers to these questions. He only felt that after listening to His Majesty's explanation, he was suddenly enlightened. In the past, he had never thought about where he came from or where he would go. Now he understood that they all migrated from the barbarian land. Apart from the Four Kingdoms, the world was very, very big. The Fertile Plains alone were several times the size of Grey Castle, and it was not the border. Another thing that attracted him was the generous pay in the recruitment order. "You're the one with the most ideas, so I think you should think more clearly than us." Tigerclaw turned around and grabbed Snaketooth's arm. "The demons are definitely not as easy to deal with as you think. If they're really vulnerable, how can they drive human beings out of their original habitat? According to His Majesty, there are hundreds of cities and millions of people in them." "Of course I know that. That's why I applied to join." Snaketooth remained unmoved. 35 silver royals a month, 6 months' salary in advance, and the right to buy a double room. If I miss this opportunity, I don't know when I'll get another one. Double room again. Tigerclaw twitched the corner of his mouth. "You really care about this?" "Of course." Snaketooth clenched his fists. "Not only can it provide hot water, but it also has separate kitchens and toilets. That's a real house." Although his salary was less than Tigerclaw's, he still had one golden dragon. The reason why he had not bought a house yet was that he had his eyes on a double room in the residential area of the inner city. This idea had taken root in his mind ever since he saw what the foreman's house looked like. However, the deposit for the double room was higher, and he had to pay 3 golden dragons at a time. Most importantly, Snaketooth did not mention it. Unlike a single room where 2 people had to squeeze together to sleep, a double room was enough for the other person to sleep comfortably. Seeing that Tigerclaw was about to say something, Snaketooth shook his head and interrupted him. I know it's a little risky, but when didn't I take risks when I was a rat? The only difference is that even if I took risks in the past, I would probably get nothing out of it. At least now, I can be sure of the return. Although you think I'm smart, it's useless in Neverwinter. If we only want to be safe, why did we come to this strange place in the first place? Anyway, I can't argue with you. Tiger Claw reached out his hand to show his surrender. As long as you think it over carefully. Don't worry. I'm not so greedy that I don't care about the cost. Snaketooth spread out his hands and said, this engineering team will not only be protected by the First Army, but also some witches. Even if we encounter demons, we won't have to rush forward with a pole and shovel. Generally speaking, it's safer. I hope it's as you said, Tiger Claw muttered. I'm going to wash my face. My stomach is growling. Since you applied for a job with a higher salary than mine, I can't be too stingy with this meal. Snaketooth rolled his eyes. While Tiger Claw was washing his face, he unfolded the third piece of paper and was stunned. It was a transfer contract. The general content of the contract was that no matter what happened, City Hall would not embezzle the salary and other rewards that should be paid. In case of any misfortune during a foreign project, the signatory could choose one person to whom the property would be transferred. When the contract came into effect, the other party would receive a notice from City Hall. He closed his eyes, and several figures appeared in his mind one by one. Joe Sunflower, Tiger Claw. Finally, the image stopped on a thin, fair-skinned girl. Snaketooth picked up a charcoal pen and slowly wrote the name in the blank space of the contract. Chapter 935. 1. Horford Quinn stood in front of the French window in his study with a glass of wine in his hand, gazing at the city shrouded in darkness. This was the center of the Kingdom of Dawn, also known as the City That Never Sleeps. With the Rising Sun Avenue as the center, the lights extended to both sides like a luxuriant tree of light. At the top of the tree was the most famous shopping mall in the kingdom. Every day, countless treasures flowed here from all over the world. For merchants, the night was the beginning of their lives. In order to maintain this dazzling brilliance, the king's city consumed an astonishing number of candles, firewood, and lamp oil every day. Fish fat from the eastern harbor and firewood from the northern hills were continuously transported into the city by ships. This industry alone was conservatively estimated to support nearly 10,000 people and more than 100 merchants. And this was just a small part of the commercial trade in the king's city. Usually, one of Horford's greatest joys was to enjoy the night view of the City of Glow. Under the joint governance of the Moya royal family and the three major families, the city had turned from a wasteland into a famous and prosperous place today. This was due to the continuous efforts of his ancestors. But today he felt inexplicably tired. The night view of the City of Glow looked the same as usual, still gorgeous and moving, but beyond the illumination of the Tree of Light, the faint surging undercurrent could no longer be ignored. Even in the face of such a brightly lit territory, he felt a strong sense of uneasiness. Maybe I'm really old. Horford took a sip of wine, and the bitterness in his mouth seemed to be stronger than the sweetness. Father. The door of the study was pushed open, and a young man came in. Baron Alphonse of Beifong City wants to see you. No, Horford said without turning his head. Just say I'm sick. But. He hesitated for a moment, then waved his hand at the old butler beside him. The latter immediately nodded knowingly, turned around, and walked out of the study. Seeing that only the two of them were left in the room, the man said worriedly, Father, this is the 12th noble you've refused. Even I know that there's something wrong with the one in the palace. The purpose of these foreign nobles entering the city is obvious. If you do this, I'm afraid they will mistakenly think. Mistakenly think what? I mistakenly thought. He bit his lip. You were still on His Majesty Apenmoya's side. Horn. Earl Quinn turned around and frowned at the heir of the Quinn family. Do you think it's a mistake for the three families of the Glow Light to stand on the side of the King of Dawn? But now His Majesty doesn't need us anymore, Horn said bravely. Ever since the army suffered a crushing defeat in Hermes, he has never consulted you about political affairs. As the Prime Minister, you can't even step into the palace, And even the patrols outside the city have been replaced with mercenaries. Look at the kind of people the king summons into his castle every day. All he needs now are clowns, performers, and courtesans. The count did not answer, but looked at his glass in silence. Horn was only 18 years old. Even he could see the meaning behind the nobles from all over the country flocking to the capital. So it was impossible for the other local nobles not to notice any changes. In fact, when he received the news of the army's defeat, he had already expected this day to come. An army of more than 10,000 people, with most of the city's lords participating, hoping to scrape a piece of meat from the giant that was about to fall. However, in the end, not only did they not get any property, but they also lost their lives. If that was all, it would not have been a big deal. The key was that the King of Dawn came back alive, but his Knight Legion was completely destroyed. When Appin returned to the capital in a sorry state, the news spread like wildfire. This was equivalent to satisfying two conditions at the same time. Someone needed to be responsible for the failure and the unfulfilled promises, and Appin's power could no longer dispel the other nobles. These nobles who quietly entered the city and visited under the cover of the night was an obvious signal. They undoubtedly wanted to see the reaction of the three families before deciding whether to rely on them or ally with them. However, there was no way that they would maintain the status quo. Horford could guess what the group of people were thinking with his eyes closed. Since they had lost so much in Hermes, they naturally had to find other places to make up for it. Father, seeing that he did not speak, Horn became a little anxious. Things are not like 10 years ago. Appin Moya is no longer the King Moya. Look at the Luashi family. Otto Luashi is still locked up in the palace. You are the prime minister and have a very high prestige among the people. As long as you stand up and bring the other two families with you, the nobles will definitely see you as their leader. Stand up. Earl Quinn's eyes narrowed, and there was a hint of danger in his tone. Horn suddenly choked. He lowered his head in fear and murmured as if to answer or defend himself. You don't have to stand on Appin's side, do you? Otherwise, why would you say that you are sick and unable to see anyone? If it were the old king, you would have personally persuaded the nobles to give priority to the stability of the kingdom. Horford sighed softly. After all, he was still a little too young. Even if that's the case, so what? Do you think Appin Moya can't see this? What? Horn was startled. I bet there are several pairs of eyes watching us outside the mansion now, including who I've met and where I've gone. Appin must know. The Earl returned to the desk and sat down. What do you think he will do to me if I see those nobles? Don't forget, even if he loses the entire Knight Regiment, his control over the king's city will not be weak. From the day Appin ascended the throne, he began to change the guards and castle guards, openly rebelling under his nose. Do you think those lords will rise up to save me when he puts a noose around my neck? Speaking of indignation, he could not help but slap the table. Why until today, it's always the foreign nobles who come to me, not the Luashi family or the Tokat family. Do you understand now? Horn gasped. Then why don't you go back to your territory first? At least there are your Knight Regiment and mercenaries there, plus the serfs you've recruited, even if he wants to harm you. The Earl shook his head. The Quinn family has been rooted here for too long. Branches, distant relatives, industries, forces. Even if I can sneak out of the city, I can't take everyone out. As long as there are any signs of trouble, they will not end well. I can't make such a rash move. In fact, my staying in the city of Glow is a guarantee in itself. Saying that I am sick is the limit of what I can do. There is nothing else I can do. Being closely connected to the king's city, which used to be the pride of his family, had now become his fatal weakness. It was ironic. Is that so? But I don't think so. At this moment, a strange voice suddenly sounded outside the door. Horford's face suddenly changed. The speaker was obviously not a servant or a guard in the mansion. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to make such an offensive move. Moreover, the housekeeper should be guarding outside the door. Why was there no response from outside when this person spoke? Who is it? Horn was also shocked. He turned around in a panic, trying to find a weapon to defend himself, but in the end, he could only pick up a candlestick. Chapter 936. Earl Quinn was so stunned that he did not even notice that the wine glass in his hand had slipped to the ground. The moment he saw her, two names involuntarily appeared in his mind. The former had accompanied him for most of his life, but died of depression because he lost his true love. The latter was the true love that he had lost, and would never be able to see again. Even though she had grown a lot taller in the 10 years since they last met, and her appearance was even more outstanding, he could still tell that the two of them were so similar that he almost blurted out the former's name. "Father, do you know her?" Horn's words made him recover from his trance with great difficulty. Horford slowly stood up and asked in a deep voice, "Are you Andrea?" "What? You mean she's the one who has passed away?" Horn's eyes widened as he looked back and forth at the two people who were looking at each other and murmured in disbelief. "Master, it's really the young lady." The old butler looked more excited than anyone else. "I can't be wrong. She has inherited all the characteristics of Madame. It seems that you still remember me," Andrea said with a blank expression. "Then the rest will be much easier to talk about." Horford's heart skipped a beat. His daughter's awakening as a witch was a secret to most people. Even his wife, Fonte, was kept in the dark. When Andrea's servant reported the incident to him, he made a prompt decision. He pushed the servant who knew about the incident into the river, and made it look like an accidental drowning. Then he used his trusted aides to plan the carriage falling off the cliff. Although he knew that doing so might make Andrea hate him, hatred was also a way to remember someone who had been separated forever. However, when they met again, this indifferent feeling became a sharp thorn. Especially when he wasn't sure if what he did back then was correct, this prickling feeling was even more obvious. But the Earl knew that there were more important things at the moment. Why did Andrea appear in the City of Glow, whether her identity was true or not? And what did she mean when she said, "I don't think so"? These were more important than questioning the right and wrong of the past. He suppressed all the doubts and thoughts in his mind and waved to Horn. "You can leave first." "Father," the latter said worriedly. "Do as I say," Horford said in an unquestionable tone. Seeing that he had made up his mind, Horn reluctantly left the room. "Do not disturb the others," continued the Count, addressing the steward, "and close the gates of the court and put out the lights in the hall. If anyone in the house asks, say that I am drawing up some papers, and that no one is to disturb me. Is that understood?" "I'll do it right away. But..." The butler scratched his head. "What about the friends that eldest miss brought?" "Friend?" He looked at Andrea suspiciously. "Bring her to the banquet hall, and treat her well." "Yes, master." As the door closed with a squeak, the study room suddenly fell into silence. The two of them looked at each other for a long time until the Count could not help but break the silence. "Although you look quite similar to my daughter, I can't be so hasty to say that you must be Andrea. After all, she was only 16 when she left, and it's been almost 10 years. He paused. "I mean, do you have any other way to prove your identity?" In fact, he had already believed in Andrea's origins. He only asked this question to seek confirmation. Even the most perfect disguise could not change a person's inner self. From her every move, the Count could see the shadow of the flower of glow in the past. Andrea did not answer. Instead, she opened her hands, and then a golden magic bow appeared in her hands. The shining longbow gradually condensed and shrank little by little, and finally evolved into a unique appearance. It was a gift that he had specially asked the craftsman to make for his daughter's birthday. At this point, Horford no longer had any doubts in his heart. This bow suitable for beginners had long been destroyed along with the carriage. Now even he could not accurately describe its appearance. Andrea, who had been particularly interested in archery since childhood, obviously still remembered it. "It's really you." The Count sighed. "Why did you come back?" "The reason I sent you away back then was because I hoped that you could live on unscathed." "That's all?" Andrea put away the longbow. "Not because you're afraid of outsiders knowing that the Prime Minister had a daughter who was seduced by the devil? I don't feel like I'm being protected, not abandoned. For a witch, there's no real safe place. If I wasn't lucky enough to meet a group of people who shared the same fate as me, I'm afraid I would have died in a foreign land." He opened his mouth, but could not refute, because this was also one of his concerns at that time. If the fact that Andrea was a witch was exposed, the whole family might be in danger. Not everyone could shackle their loved ones and send them to the hands of the church or other nobles with a clear conscience. Rather than let the Quinn family face this difficult choice, it was better for him to make the decision alone. But that's all in the past. I'm not here to bring up the past, Andrea said seriously. You must be very curious about how I could openly enter the Earl's mansion. After all, the guards won't easily believe my words. After seeing the butler, I deliberately waited for a while outside the door. Is the man who called your father the heir of the family? When did I have a brother like this? He was adopted from a branch. Your mother died of illness a year after you left, and the Quinn family needs an heir, Horford said in a low voice. If it had not been for the accident 10 years ago, this position would have belonged to the eldest daughter. After hearing this news, Andrea was stunned at first, and then her eyes became gloomy. She was silent for a while before she said, "In any case, there's no way to change the head of the Quinn family for the time being. His Majesty hopes that you can go further, instead of retreating behind the scenes. In the current situation, he doesn't recognize any representative except for Earl Quinn, the head of the three big families." What do you mean? Horford could not understand the meaning of her words. You mean by His Majesty? Chapter 937. What are you talking about? Even Earl Quinn, who had seen many things in his life, was shocked by Andrea's words. What surprised him was not the new King of Dawn, but His Majesty, Roland Wimbledon, entrusted me with this mission. The same sentence could be said by many people, but even if they did not change a single word, the meaning would still be different. What Horn had expressed before was similar, but Earl Quinn knew very well that it was impossible to break free from the control of the Moya royal family with the power of his family alone. The so-called stepping forward was just an unrealistic fantasy. However, when the speaker became the King of Grey Castle, the words became powerful. Just as you thought. Andrea's tone was no longer as sharp as before, probably because of the news of her mother's death. His Majesty doesn't want Appen Moya to continue sitting on the throne, nor does he want to see a neighboring country in constant strife. In order to stabilize the situation as soon as possible, it is necessary to support an indisputable new king. After confirming that he had not misheard, the Earl murmured, "Why me?" He doesn't know many people in the Kingdom of Dawn, so he chose me at first, but I refused. Just for this reason? Because his daughter refused, he threw the throne to his daughter's father? It was like a child's play. But surprisingly, Horford felt that Andrea was not joking. Although Appen forbade anyone from talking about the failure of the Battle of Hermes, there were too many nobles involved, so it was impossible to completely ban it. Horford knew very well that Appen's enemy was not the church, but Grey Castle, which was also looting the Holy City. The 10,000-strong army was defeated almost immediately, and many of the participants could not even tell how they were defeated. Fire and thunder continued to fall from the sky. Whether it was the defenseless serfs or the armored knight, they all turned into ashes in the fire. If the source of the news was right, it meant that the power of Grey Castle was beyond the imagination of the nobles. With such a contrast in strength, it did not seem unreasonable to decide who the next king of a neighboring country was. The only question was, why did he not do it himself? If the nobles of the Kingdom of Dawn are willing to gather all their forces and have a head-on confrontation with him, he will definitely consider this option. Andrea seemed to have known that the Earl would ask such a question. To put it simply, His Majesty has more important enemies to deal with. He doesn't have the time to spend another 3 or 4 years integrating the entire Kingdom of Dawn into the Kingdom of Grey Castle. After all, it's easy to destroy the ruling power of the nobles, but it's a long process to restore order. An even more important enemy. That's right, Demon, Andrea said slowly. Otto Luashi should have mentioned to you that everything the church has done is for the news of the Battle of Doomsday, and that is only the tip of the shocking secret. This war is called Divine Will, and it has been going on for nearly 1,000 years. After listening to his daughter's story, Earl Horford felt a layer of cold sweat on his back. It turned out that the prosperous Four Kingdoms, including the Kingdom of Dawn, was actually a corner of the world that was not even worth mentioning? Humans had failed twice in a row, and if they failed again, they would be doomed eternally. How could Roland Wimbledon dare to take on such a heavy responsibility and fight for the ownership of the divine will with an incredibly powerful enemy? How much willpower and courage did it take? Just thinking about it made him feel like he was about to suffocate. Why? The Earl asked in a daze. What's in it for him? Isn't he afraid of failure? I don't know. Andrea sighed. Her Highness Tilly also mentioned this, but her explanation was even more puzzling. What did she say? Rather than saying it's for the sake of humans, it's more like it's for himself. She hesitated. It's as if he's looking for a new challenge, and we're just the beneficiaries of a coincidence. The Earl did not respond because he really did not know what to say. He had seen too many high-ranking nobles, but none of them was similar to Roland Wimbledon. In the end, he had to skip this question and return to the main topic. What do I need to do? Fight for him? No need. Andrea shook her head. You just need to maintain the stability of the Kingdom of Dawn and provide some assistance to Grey Castle, such as population, minerals, and other resources. As for the specific content, he'll send someone to discuss it with you. Horford was relieved to hear that there would be a price. If Andrea only wanted to support the Quinn family, he had to suspect whether there was a huge conspiracy behind it. Of course, even if it was a conspiracy, judging from the current situation of the family, they could only bite the bullet and agree to it. Refusing on the grounds of illness was just a delaying tactic to achieve a balance between Appin and the nobles. If the nobles could really overthrow the Moya family, the Quinn family would undoubtedly be excluded from the power circle of the King's City because of their stance of not taking sides with each other, and this was already the best result. If someone wanted to take advantage of the three big families, it would not be difficult for them to be classified as loyal to the royal family, with a little exaggeration. This was a rare opportunity. Moreover, the person who pulled the strings was Andrea. She might hate him, but she would never take the initiative to push the family into the fire pit. Thinking of this, Earl Horford immediately made a decision. Please tell His Majesty Wimbledon that I'm willing to serve the King of Grey Castle, he said seriously. Although he was facing his daughter, she was now the king's messenger, so the Earl meticulously bowed his head in accordance with the noble's salute. When will he take action? If I want to arrange for Grey Castle's army to sneak into the city, I need at least 2 to 3 months to prepare. Even if Appin stripped him of his power to control the patrol team, he was confident that he could quietly let dozens of people in. After all, as the Prime Minister of 2 kings, he still had influence. The Earl believed that the foreign nobles who wanted to rope him in also saw this point. According to the strength that Grey Castle had shown in the war, dozens of people were enough to control a city gate. But Andrea's words still greatly exceeded his expectations. Since you've agreed, we'll act now, she said lightly. His Majesty stressed that this is not a political assassination, but a complete defeat of Appin Moya in front of everyone. Not only to let everyone see that the rule of the Moya family has ended, but also to convince all the nobles who are ready to take action. Now, the Earl could not believe his ears for a moment. How is that possible? Do you know how I got here? Andrea spread out her hands. I walked in from the front door. Those guards did want to stop me, but unfortunately, they couldn't do it. Horford immediately realized that the friend she brought was the key. It was not difficult to break into the Earl's mansion in the King's City. After all, this was not his territory. But it was very difficult to do it quietly, which meant that the two sides would be able to determine the winner in an instant. There was no doubt that this was not something that Andrea could do. Those guards all wore god stones of retaliation. Chapter 938. Otto Luashi was awakened by a loud noise. He opened his heavy eyelids and looked around. The candles on the candlesticks were almost out, and the thin flames made the room very dark. He could not see day or night in the dungeon, so the candles were the only thing he had to measure time. Every 6 hours, the candles would be replaced, along with the plates in front of him. But that was in the beginning. Now whether it was the candles or the food, the delivery time was getting longer and longer. Sometimes he would even wake up hungry and find the dungeon was still dark. How long had he been locked up here? Otto pressed his forehead and shook it, trying to wake himself up. The long period of imprisonment without light had made him mentally and physically exhausted. Especially when he woke up in the darkness where he couldn't even see his own fingers. It made him feel a sense of helplessness, as if he had been forgotten by everyone. But he had to live, because the fate of his father, and even the entire Luoshi family, was in the hands of Appin. Otto propped up his weak body, rolled out of bed, and slowly walked to the railing. In addition to replenishing the plates and water jugs, he also hoped that the guards could give him a razor. The beard that had not been shaved for a long time had grown all over his cheeks. Every time he ate, there would be grease and residue left on it. After a long time, it would naturally emit an unpleasant smell, like moldy and rotten orange peel. If the guards were worried, he could let them shave him. After all, he was a noble and should not be refused when it came to his appearance. Then Otto heard a conversation coming from outside the iron gate. What the hell are those people doing? That's the eldest son of the Luoshi family. Judging from the volume, the speaker did not seem to be whispering, as if he did not care about being heard. Teasing and ridiculing. Isn't that what clowns do? They're crazy. If these acrobatic troops dared to offend the Earl's son, I'm afraid they would become fish food at the bottom of the river the next day. They're just a group of homeless people. You also know that it's a normal day? Usually, the eldest son would be locked up in the dungeon. Now His Majesty likes to watch those guys play tricks. Without the permission of the King of Dawn, I don't think they would dare to do such a thing. Bah, you're just guessing. I'm just saying it casually. Believe it or not, it's up to you. By the way, what can you do if you don't believe me? Are you going to change dinner for that big shot in prison? Sigh, forget it. It's just a few mouthfuls of saliva. Eating it won't kill you. Following this sentence, the sound of a bunch of keys colliding with each other rang out. That's right. If this is what His Majesty wants to see, aren't you asking for trouble? Hurry up, I'm still waiting to collect the plates. The iron door made a sour grinding sound, and the warden walked in with a plate of food. Oh my lord, you're awake? When he saw Aotua leaning against the railing, he seemed a little surprised, but the awkwardness on his face was quickly concealed. Just in time, finish your dinner today. I'll change the candles tomorrow. The housekeeper forgot to send new ones over. Otto did not reply. He felt so sad that he even forgot to ask for a shave. Even though there were only a few words, he was able to deduce the truth behind the noise from their conversation. The clown of the acrobatic troupe met the food delivery man, and spat a few mouthfuls of saliva into his food in order to please Appin Moya. The humiliation made his cheeks burn as if they were being roasted by fire. The head jailer did not care about his reply. After he finished changing the plates, he quickly left the cell. Although the furnishings and decorations in the cell were as exquisite as those in a duke's mansion, the oppressive atmosphere made no one want to stay here any longer. As the footsteps faded away, silence enveloped Otto. For a moment he even wanted to shout out loud, to scold the warden for his dereliction of duty, and to scold Appin for his neglect. But he did not do so in the end, because it was meaningless. The former would only make the next change come later, and the latter might be what his old friend wanted. As for the dinner that was used to humiliate him, he did not even want to touch it. Otto could not help but wonder if what he had done was right. Just as he was about to go back to bed, his body suddenly trembled. From the corner of his eye, he saw that the oatmeal on the plate had turned into a bowl of black water. The eldest son of Luoshi rubbed his eyes, slowly moved to the plate, and carefully picked up the oatmeal. It was not his illusion, nor was it the shadow caused by the weak firelight. The oatmeal had really turned black like sticky ink. In an instant, a flash of light flashed through his mind. The acrobatic troupe, the clown, the trick. Was it all arranged by that person? Yorko said you were an ordinary acrobat. Is it true? How did you know His Majesty? It was just a coincidence. As for why His Majesty liked me, it was probably because I was good at acrobatics. Oh, can you show me? It doesn't matter. Let's do the simplest cuttlefish spitting ink. Otto stared at the oatmeal for a moment, and suddenly put his finger into the bowl. After feeling around for a while, he felt a slightly rough sensation on his fingertips. How? How did you do this? Why did the water suddenly change color? It's not over yet. Look at this gauze. There's nothing on it, right? Now I wet it in water and then dry it with fire. Guess what will happen? There's nothing. Oh wait, that's writing? Can you tell what it's written? Let me see. This is your name? That's right, Hillfox. That's my name. Otto gently pinched the rough piece and slowly lifted the surface of the oatmeal. It looked almost transparent, and was hard to tell even if it was directly immersed in the oatmeal. Only when he rubbed it with his hand could he feel the existence of the gauze. He held his breath, walked quickly to the candlestick, and unfolded it little by little. The faint black water began to fade, and the candle was about to go out. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, he shouted anxiously in his heart. The swaying shadows seemed to envelop him from all directions, and in his hand was the only light in the world. The moment the words appeared, the candle went out. Darkness swallowed the whole dungeon. Otto couldn't help but chuckle. He held his trembling shoulders and stuffed the gauze into his mouth. Then he crawled back to the railing and swallowed it with the oatmeal. A warm current flowed through his throat and organs, filling his body with strength. But compared to the oatmeal, his heart was warmer. He drank the oatmeal silently, and a tear rolled down from the corner of his eye. His persistence finally paid off. There were only a few words on the gauze. The handwriting was graceful and elegant, with a familiar feeling from his childhood. Chapter 939. What did you say? The King of Dawn pushed away the singer in his arms, and stood up abruptly. The woman with the pink silk draped over her, her naked body faintly discernible, fell to the ground. It was obvious that the fall was not light, but she did not even dare to cry out in pain. The rest of the servants, performers, and jugglers also lowered their heads in fear. The entire palace hall suddenly became silent. Your Majesty, the minister swallowed his saliva and said, your Prime Minister has rebelled. Are you sure it's a rebellion and not an attempt to serve those fools outside? Appin did not know whether he should doubt his ears or the incompetent people who exaggerated the words of the Watcher tenfold. It was not that he was not aware of the plans of the nobles from the other territories. Anyone who came back alive from Hermes had basically seen the destruction of the knights in the king's city, as well as his embarrassing appearance when he fled. It was naive to expect them to remain loyal to the royal family at this time. It was normal to have unusual movements and to form cliques. Obviously, the three big families in the king's city were their first choice. Appin had long been on guard against this, but he thought that according to the temperament of the three old ministers, they would probably behave themselves and not come out. After all, the king's city was still in his hands, and any action that annoyed him was tantamount to suicide. He did not expect that the Quinn family would be the first to have a problem. Colluding with a foreign lord was already an affront to his dignity. Perhaps the old earl only wanted to leave a way out, or declare his own position. But no matter what the reason was, such an affront would definitely be punished. Just like Otto Luashi, he had restrained himself enough not to kill his childhood friend on the spot. But what did he mean by rebellion? Earl Quinn was in the city of Glow and had neither subjects nor soldiers. How could he rely on the dozens of guards around him? What a joke! What right did he have to rebel? The earl did contact the foreign nobles. No, but it was not a private meeting. He sent an invitation. The minister wiped the sweat from his forehead. He publicly invited all the nobles to his mansion, and persuaded them to serve the Quinn family. Appin was stunned and could hardly understand the news he had heard. This action could indeed be linked to rebellion, but the method was a little too unimaginable. Instead of getting help from the nobles, he wanted them to be loyal to Quinn. Did Horford really know what he was doing? He was already a dangerous ship that could capsize at any time. How could there be nobles who would agree to this proposal? This was undoubtedly making enemies on both sides. The Moya royal family would never tolerate such a serious provocation, and such foolishness would only make the nobles sneer. But then again, was the Prime Minister such an arrogant person in the past? After a long silence, Appin said, "Pass on my order." Have Serbakov, the commander of the patrol, bring a team to the Earl's mansion, and bring Horford Quinn to see me. As for the rest of the people in the mansion, they were temporarily detained in the prison. If anyone tried to stop them, they could be killed on the spot. I'd like to see how he's going to explain this. Yes, Your Majesty. After hearing the news, he was no longer in the mood to have fun. After driving away everyone in the hall, Appin could not help but lean on the throne. He did not simply want to have fun. It was just that once the surroundings became quiet, the roar of Skyfire would constantly echo in his ears. The war more than a month ago had left an indelible impression in his heart. No. It was not a war but a one-sided massacre. His army had no power to fight back at all. Whether it was the knight or the serfs, there was no difference in the face of the attack of Grey Castle. After returning to King's City, Appin found that he no longer had the courage to fight against Roland. The setback brought to him by the fiasco was even heavier than the death of his father. What was more desperate was that he knew that the Moya family had lost the entire Kingdom of Dawn. What was the consequence of offending a powerful neighboring country? There was no doubt that sooner or later, the other side would annex the territory he inherited from his father, and he could do nothing about it. When he ascended the throne, he was full of ambition. He wanted to govern the kingdom so that the people could live a stable life and no longer have to worry about the threat of witches, demonic beasts, and other otherworldlings. However, after only 1 year of being on the throne, he had lost all interest in politics and commerce. He could only wait for the enemy's army to come and hang him on the wall. At the thought of this, Appin's hatred for the king of Grey Castle increased day by day, and he could not wait to eat his flesh raw. If it were not for Roland Wimbledon, he would have gone down in history as a wise king. All this was the other side's fault. The new king of Grey Castle had been bewitched by the witches. He slapped the armrest hard and had nowhere to vent the anger in his heart. When he caught Earl Quinn, he would definitely let him have a good taste of the wrath of a king. However, in the afternoon, his newly appointed minister ran into the palace with a panicked look on his face. Your Majesty, Serbakov is dead. The patrol team was completely wiped out. The King of Dawn grabbed the minister's collar in shock. Did they set a trap around the mansion? Or did they hide guards in the mansion? Yes, they hid guards, the minister replied quickly. I saw it with my own eyes. Bakov first asked the earl to come out, but when he refused, he went straight into the house to catch people, but they were soon killed by his guards. Not only that, but they also rushed out of the courtyard and fought with the patrol team that surrounded the mansion. Those people were simply lunatics. They had all kinds of weapons in their hands, such as boning knives, wooden sticks, and even green bricks. In less than a quarter of an hour, the team was defeated. How many of them were there? About 7 or 8. Bastard! Appin threw the minister to the ground. How can 7 or 8 people be called hiding? Even a businessman in the city of Glow can gather a dozen guards. Are you scared out of your wits? And how could a patrol of 100 or 200 people be defeated by 7 or 8 guards? Even if there were 200 wild boars, they shouldn't have been defeated so quickly. Are they not even as good as the pigs in the hunting ground? Your Majesty, those people are not human beings, they are monsters, the minister said with a sad face. Most of the patrol couldn't even take one blow from them. That's not the strength and speed of a human being. Appin's heart suddenly trembled. He seemed to have seen such a description before. Yes, he remembered that the murderer of his father, the 2 church witches who claimed to be pure witches, had shown him the terrible force of the God's punishment army. Could it be that Earl Quinn colluded with the church? An uncontrollable anger suddenly rose from the bottom of his heart. Rithers! Appin shouted. A knight quickly came in from outside the hall, knelt down on one knee and said, Your Majesty, what can I do for you? Immediately gather all the mercenaries in the city of Glow, bring heavy crossbows and fire arrows, and burn Earl Quinn's mansion to the ground. He roared. Whether they are human beings or monsters, I want them all to be burned to ashes. But that's the inner city, the knight said hesitantly. If it causes a fire, I'm afraid it'll be difficult to deal with. Shut up and do as I say, Appin roared hysterically. If you can't burn him to death, you don't have to come back to see me. Even the gods' punishment army had no chance of winning when faced with an army that was 100 times their size, and was armed with heavy crossbows. Those who colluded with the church had only one end: death. The next day, the King of Dawn received news from the Watcher again. The mercenary group that had prepared for a whole night had not arrived at the Earl's mansion. When passing through the Rising Sun Avenue, the mercenary group was attacked by an acrobatic troupe. He was sure that he had not misheard the minister's report. A group of acrobatic performers who were performing on the street suddenly attacked the mercenary group. The mercenary group was caught off guard and suffered heavy losses. The fighting style of those performers was exactly the same as that of Earl Quinn's guards. Chapter 940. In the next few days, the situation changed so fast that it was beyond everyone's expectations. The people of the King's City had never thought that they would see such a scene. The Quinn family, who had served the Moya royal family for hundreds of years, openly stood on the opposite side of Apen Moya. This was not a secret plot, nor was there a struggle between the aristocratic families that the civilians could not access. Everything was laid out on the table. The Prime Minister of the City of Glow stood directly in front of everyone and publicly announced his ideals and goals. In short, it was to overthrow the rule of the incompetent tyrant and give the Kingdom of Dawn a better future. In his speech, the Earl cited the signs of the decline of the city in the past year, and the stupid tyranny of the new king, and described the inevitable decline of the Kingdom of Dawn with precise data. Since no noble had ever talked about the operating principles and inside stories of the territory to the people, and the speaker was the Prime Minister who had served the king for more than a decade, it caused a sensation. From the auction houses of the Chamber of Commerce to the taverns on Black Street, almost everyone was talking about it. I was wondering why hundreds of people starved to death in the slums last winter. It turns out that it was caused by the reduction of farmland in the outer city. In fact, more people died outside. It's not a problem for His Majesty to take the land to expand the palace, but what about the grain reserves that the Earl said are gradually decreasing? No wonder the grain prices have risen a lot recently. I heard that the farmers in the suburban towns have been forced to go to war. Now the army is in a mess, and only a few of those who were conscripted can come back. Doesn't that mean the grain prices will rise again? Alas, I hope that we won't starve during the months of demons this year. Why do you want to support Earl Quinn? He promised that if he can achieve his goal, the City of Glow will no longer have to worry about the food problem, and everyone will be able to fill their stomachs in the future. Hey, I didn't say that. The speech of the Imperial Prime Minister quickly spread throughout the City of Glow through such discussions. If a considerable number of people were skeptical about the content of the propaganda, what attracted them to continue to pay attention to this matter was the conflict itself. The great noble families and the Moya royal family opposed each other. How many times could they see such a grand occasion in their lives? For the people, they could only hear rumors or boasting about the nobles in the taverns, which had been modified and exaggerated many times. These days, they felt that it was simply too exciting. This was not a performance, but a real rebellion. King Apen was not indifferent. Several battles broke out between the two sides, but the royal family was defeated every time. Earl Quinn's power was beyond everyone's imagination. An incredibly powerful guard became his solid shield. Not only did they defeat His Majesty's troops despite the huge difference in numbers, but they also had more and more people. At the beginning there were only a dozen of them, but now there were 40 or 50 of them. What was even more exciting was that the Earl openly announced his plan. He would move the front line 500 steps towards the castle district every day until the King of Dawn abdicated the throne, surrendered the crown to him, or was driven off the throne. In other words, the outcome of this confrontation would be decided in 5 days at most. Bang! Bang! Apen smashed everything on the desk onto the carpet, until the exquisite room became a mess. Even so, it was unable to alleviate the anger in his heart. Damn it, damn it! When did I ever reduce the farmland in the outer city? Isn't that what my father asked me to investigate? How dare you blame me for the desertion of the suburban villages? It's clearly Roland Wimbledon's doing. He almost roared. It's his witches who killed those people, not me. Your Majesty, please calm down. The minister and the chief knight tried to persuade him. The most important thing now is to stop Horford Quinn from moving forward, so as to dispel his arrogance. The foreign nobles are all watching you. I should have put them all in prison from the beginning, Appin thought bitterly. How many people do I have available now? There are still 1,500 knight, guards, squires, and mercenaries in the palace. If the maids and servants are also mobilized, we can add another 2,000 people, the chief knight replied. There's a stone wall outside the castle district for guards. They don't need much training to kill the enemy. Although the wall is not as thick as the main city wall, it's not a problem for people to stand on it. This was originally a trump card he used to deal with the other lords, especially the palace guards. Almost every one of them had the combat ability of a quasi-knight, and their equipment was especially excellent. Before his father passed away, he had begun to train them, but now he had no choice but to use them in the defense of the palace. Take out all the boxes in the vault, and tell the servants that as long as they kill a monster, they can get a reward of 100 golden dragon. Appin gritted his teeth. If they can thwart the enemy's rebellion, I'll grant them a title and a fiefdom. Add another reward for those who have it. Yes, the church's scourge was not invulnerable, which he had confirmed from the pure witch. Even if those monsters were extremely strong, it was impossible for them to tear down the whole stone wall with their bare hands, right? As for the increasing number of monsters, it was just a smokescreen of Earl Quinn. He must have arranged some thugs long ago, and then disguised it as an illusion that his strength was growing. No nobleman would believe that such a fierce warrior could be found anywhere in the city of Glow, and it was not until today that he appeared. And it did not matter even if the stupid civilians believed it. Their thoughts had no influence on the situation at all. Has that old guy Horford gotten the support of other nobles? Appin looked at the minister. The latter's face suddenly became a little ugly. Avis, speak. It's rumored that Black Money has begun to contact Earl Quinn, but the specific situation is temporarily unknown. This group of pervasive maggots. Appin clenched his fists. Father even regarded their underground kennel as part of the market. In my opinion, they should have been raided earlier. However, he also knew that this sentence was just to vent his anger. The organizers of Black Money were all rich businessmen in the city of Glow, and their status was no less than that of the great nobles. Moreover, a large part of the wealth accumulated in the Moya family's treasury came from the pockets of these people. In addition, the Tokat family has publicly come together with the Quinn family. The minister swallowed. But Your Majesty, please don't worry too much. I heard that the Luashi family has refused Horford Quinn's invitation several times. These are the three families that father is so proud of. Appin sneered in his heart. Now 2 families had become traitors and moved faster than the small nobles who were watching on the sidelines. The reason why the last family did not dare to act rashly was that Otto Luashi was still in his hands. But this might be a weapon for him. Send someone to tell Earl Luashi that if he wants to prove his innocence, he should immediately bring the knight and squire of the territory to support the palace. Appin said coldly, otherwise, I will not show mercy to the heir of the family who rebelled. I'll do it now. The minister hurriedly responded. For hours later, the King of Dawn received the news that Earl Luashi was willing to pledge allegiance to him, which calmed his anger a little. Compared with the bad news flying all over the sky, he finally pulled the situation back to his side a little. Appin did not care much about the knight of the Luashi family. The most important thing was that he knew the younger generation of the 3 families were very close. If they knew that going against the king would cost one of their lives, would they still keep in line with the ruler of the family? This was undoubtedly a poisonous thorn that was difficult to remove. Chapter 941. When the light of dawn crossed the city wall and shone into the inner city of King's City, the streets and alleys were full of onlookers. The city of Glow had never been as lively as it was today. Unlike the auction that only rich merchants and nobles participated in, this was a carnival that belonged to all the citizens of the city. They had never interacted with the big shots of the upper class. Even the entry-level knight of the nobility was unreachable in the eyes of the public. Now they had the opportunity to witness the transfer of power at the highest level, especially when they followed Earl Quinn's team slowly forward. They even had the illusion that they were driving the change of the situation. Today, the talk of rebellion had gradually disappeared and was replaced by fighting for the throne. Who would be the new ruler of the Kingdom of Dawn? The answer would be clear after this battle. It seems that your name and reputation are extraordinary in the hearts of the people. Hill Fox rode side by side with the Count. I thought that the public's opinion would only change when you occupied the castle district. Maybe it's because I've reorganized the patrol team and handled the internal affairs of King's City for half of my life. The old Earl sighed. Is this also the information you collected when you ran the circus? Although the other party was only a civilian without a title, and the status of an acrobatic troupe performer was much lower than that of a free citizen, Horford did not dare to look down on him at all. According to Andrea, he was the agent of the King of Grey Castle in the city of Glow, and his status was even higher than that of the ambassador Yorko. After Yorko's withdrawal, Hill not only did not leave, but he also ran several acrobatic troupes. Without exposing his identity, he spread his eyes and ears to the streets and alleys of the city. In the face of someone who was both capable and trusted by Roland, even though he was an earl, he still had to show basic respect. Moreover, he still needed Hill's help at the moment. The will of the people is very important, Your Excellency. Hill nodded. In the eyes of the great nobles, they may be just an inconspicuous plate of loose sand or lambs to provide tax revenue. But sometimes sand can break teeth, and lambs can also kill herdsmen. If this scene happened in Neverwinter, I'm afraid the result would be very different. What do you think? Earl Tokat, who was riding on the other side of the Prime Minister, asked curiously. As long as there are signs of this, the people will report the plotters to the City Hall before His Majesty does anything. Hill smiled. Mr. Hill. Otto Luwashi's good friend Oro Tokat coughed and pointed behind him. Did you find the rats behind us? I happen to be friends with their leader, Sheer said calmly. What do you think? With this, we'll be much more powerful. The old Earl thought to himself. More than 1,000 rats, after changing into the leather armor provided by the Black Money Chamber of Commerce, looked decent at first glance. Otherwise, it would be a little weak to rely on only 40 extraordinary warriors and his and Earl Tokat's attendants. But a rat was a rat after all. Apart from being useless, he, a dignified noble, had to accompany a black street rat. This made him feel a little uncomfortable. In addition, they were also famous for their double-dealing and sky-high prices. Only God knew what kind of agreement Hill had reached with them. Aren't you worried that this group of people will mutiny on the spot? Oro obviously could not hold back the words in his heart. You know, betrayal is a common thing for them. That depends on what the bargaining chip is. Hill looked at Earl Quinn. In your name, I promise them the identity of free people. If you can successfully become the King of Dawn, they can bid farewell to their precarious lives and become citizens of the City of Glow under your protection. Horford could not help but frown. Although the rats are indeed hated and spurned by most people, what really makes them fall is poverty and hunger, not recognition. Even if I forgive them of their past sins, if we can't fundamentally change this, then the identity I gave them will be meaningless. Sooner or later, they will become rats again. Since these people are willing to make such a trip for the identity, it shows that they are not stupid or lazy people. Maybe they just lack an opportunity, Hill said in a relaxed tone. As for the reason for their fall, don't worry. When His Majesty's messenger comes again, you'll find that the City of Glow will never be short of jobs to make a living. You don't have to support them all the time, because when the time comes, they will support themselves. After passing through the market area, the mighty procession entered the Rising Sun Avenue. The walls of the castle area were already in sight. Behind the stone wall was the place where the Moya family had lived for generations. Horford suddenly felt a little nervous as he gazed at the palace and the tower that was illuminated by the morning sun. He had been the Prime Minister for more than a decade and had experienced too many twists and turns. Apart from the discovery that his daughter was a witch and the death of Fontui, there was nothing else that could make him feel emotional. But today, by chance, he stood in front of a whole new field. even if the mastermind behind it was the king of Grey Castle. Even if he was only fighting for the throne in name, as long as he went one step further, the Quinn family would ascend to the pinnacle that the nobles could reach, to become a royal family in charge of a country. Although he had violated the admonition of his ancestors, he had given his family the possibility of a metamorphosis. With such a complicated feeling, the old earl could not help but ask, "Is it really okay to let my daughter participate in this battle?" Of course, you may not know this, but Andrea is no longer the noble lady who can't live without your protection. She's now an outstanding combat witch, and the first shot in this siege will be fired by her, Hill said with a smile. Hill smiled. You should also get ready to make your final speech. Not to the extraordinary warriors and rats, but to the people who have accompanied us here. Tell them that the new era of the Kingdom of Dawn is coming soon. Andrea stood on the top floor of the bell tower, facing the wind. This was the only place in the inner city where she could overlook the stone wall of the palace. The distance between the two was about 1,000 steps. Looking from afar, the magnificent palace seemed to be able to be embraced by both arms, and the busy figures inside looked like insignificant ants. For the castle area, this was an absolutely safe distance. Even heavy catapults could not threaten the stone wall here. And here, she would open a gap for the gods' punishment witches to attack the city. At this moment, a red firework appeared in the sky above the Rising Sun Avenue. That was the signal for the start of the battle. She took out the bolt rifle that Miss Anna had personally made for her, pressed 10 bullets into the chamber, opened the scope, and raised the gun. A knight in full armor came into view. Andrea took a deep breath and activated the magic power in her body. It was a wonderful feeling. The magic power seemed to transform into a pair of gentle hands, gently holding her arms, elbows, and fingers. Being wrapped in such a way, she felt that she had entered a mysterious state, where she was as hard as a rock and as light as a feather. The former made the weapon in her hand motionless, while the latter made her become part of the wind, gently swaying with the airflow that caressed her cheeks. The moment the two became one, Andrea pulled the trigger. Chapter 942. Andrea did not look at the result at all. Instead, she aimed at the next target. The consumption of magic power for accurate shooting was not constant. Generally speaking, the more difficult the target was, the more magic power it would consume. This meant that the magic power that was enough to support a bow and arrow or a stone weapon for 2 to 4 hours could only last for about 7 minutes at such a long distance. She had to shoot as many bullets as possible. Her ability responded to her will. Andrea felt like she wasn't shooting, but dancing with the wind. Everything was so coordinated. The adjustment of the muzzle, the raising and lowering of the arms, and every movement of the body seemed to be integrated with the world. With a firing rate of 1 shot per breath, Andrea quickly emptied all 10 bullets and reloaded a new clip. The entire process was as smooth as flowing water, and it was like a performance that had a well-thought-out plan. However, the people on the stone wall were not so relaxed. The Grim Reaper was racing against time to fly towards Appin's troops, but they still had no idea about it. The knight who commanded the mercenaries to adjust the crossbows became the first victim. The range of these crossbows was more than 200 steps, and the iron arrowheads could easily penetrate the shields and knight's armor within 50 steps. It was the best weapon for defending the palace. In order to resist the powerful monster warriors, Appin moved all the inventory in the warehouse to the wall. A total of 8 crossbows were placed on the section of the wall facing the Rising Sun Avenue. Considering the limited width of the street, no matter how strong the attacker was, it would be difficult to escape the crossbows. The mercenaries only heard a muffled sound, and saw that the chest of the knight, who was still giving orders, was dented. At the same time, his body leaned back and fell to the ground without a sound. Sneak attack. There was an immediate warning from the top of the wall. Everyone pulled out their swords, but no one could find out where the attack came from. Then came the second, the third, death swarmed in. The defenders kept falling, but the enemy never showed up. An indescribable fear shrouded their hearts. Dying in battle was not a rare thing for these bloody jackals and wolves, but waiting to be killed was a different matter. This was especially true for the few mercenaries who were particularly confident in their own skills. They found that the skills they had been practicing day in and day out were useless. The other party didn't even give them a chance to fight face to face. Whether it was the clumsy servant or the experienced knight, there was no difference in the face of such a sudden attack. If the battle with Hermes had at least allowed them to see their enemies, this battle was simply waiting for the Grim Reaper to call their names. In less than 10 breaths of time, more than 20 corpses had appeared on the wall. Coupled with the miserable groans of the lucky survivors, most people's willpower was quickly on the verge of collapse. Find cover, there's a witch nearby. At this moment, the chief knight's order brought everyone back to their senses. As long as you hide behind the battlements and wooden blocks, you can avoid the attacks. Also, take out your god's punishment arrows and shoot in every possible direction. Force that bastard out. At this moment, Andrea also noticed the changes on the stone wall. A knight in gold-rimmed armor seemed to be directing the situation at the scene. People kept approaching him, using various obstacles as cover, and blindly throwing arrows around. Some even directly threw the arrows with their hands. Their purpose was self-evident. The enemy's method was not a threat to her, but if she could not completely defeat the enemy, it would hinder the god's punishment witches who were attacking the city. The position of the commander happened to form a blind spot with the clock tower. She could only faintly see the commander's arm sticking out of the battlements and a small part of his helmet. Usually, it was impossible to hit such a target, but after watching the artillery performance of the First Army, she had a different idea. Andrea constantly stimulated her magic power to fill her arms. Pushed by invisible hands, the gun in her hand kept rising until it pointed to the sky. When the familiar sense of coordination appeared again, she did not hesitate to pull the trigger. At that moment, Andrea seemed to see the trajectory of the bullet. It was thrown high into the air, and did not lose all its speed after passing the apex. Instead, with forward inertia, it dived in the direction of the target. Although the distance between the two was only 1,000 steps, it had flown a longer distance in the air, so this bullet took much longer than the previous shots. Then she lowered the muzzle, aimed at the knight's helmet, and fired. The second bullet hit the edge of the battlements accurately. Bricks and stones immediately flew in all directions. The deformed bullet hit the upper part of the helmet and sent it flying. The huge impact caused the knight to fall forward uncontrollably, exposing his soft neck. At the same time, the first bullet hit his skin at an angle and broke his cervical vertebrae into several pieces. The chief knight had no time to react. He only felt a buzzing sound behind his head, and then a cold feeling on his neck. Then he lost all consciousness. This shot almost consumed all of Andrea's remaining magic power. A strong sense of dizziness came over her. Her hands trembled, and she could not even hold the butt of the gun. However, the fall of the chief knight also crushed the mercenaries' last defense. The defense line of the stone wall collapsed. They turned around and ran toward the stairs, afraid that they would be the next target of the Grim Reaper. No one paid attention to the wooden blocks, hot oil, and crossbows on the wall anymore. The god's punishment witches also saw this change. Woo! The horn of the general attack was blown. Elena, who was in charge of the attack team, rushed to the front. In addition to her usual equipment, she also had a bundle of hemp rope in her hand. Just when she was about to reach the foot of the wall, she threw the rope in her hand with force. At the end of the rope, there was a four-cornered hook tightly tied to it. A moment later, there were several hanging ropes on the stone wall that could be climbed. For ordinary people, it would take a lot of effort to climb over the stone wall that was more than 10 feet high. However, in the eyes of the god's punishment witches, it was just a fence that could be crossed with one leg. Elena easily climbed to the top of the wall along the hemp rope, and found that the castle district was in a mess. The supervision team and the reserve team arranged by Appin did not play their due role. Just when the defenders of the stone wall were fleeing, Earl Luashi's men suddenly pulled out their swords and slashed at the guards of the King of Dawn. In addition, the escapees just wanted to leave as soon as possible. The three parties suddenly got into a scuffle. Elena raised the corner of her mouth, took the giant sword from her back, and jumped down from the stone wall. No one could resist her head-on attack. As long as the enemy was included in the range of the giant sword, he would be injured if he touched it, and would die if he touched it. With her own strength, she rushed out of the crowd and created a blank space. Chapter 943. Earl Luoshi. Damn traitor, how dare he? Appin, who was watching the battle from the top floor of the castle, flew into a rage and said, I'm going to kill him and his son. Minister, where is my minister? Your Majesty, Lord Cologne said he had to deal with something. After a while, the chief guard replied hesitantly, but I think he may not come back. What did you say? The King of Dawn suddenly turned around and looked at the chief guard, gasping for breath. You agreed at the time. The chief guard bit the bullet and said, in addition to Lord Cologne, there are also Lord Wylent and Neil, the golden hourglass. Your Majesty, now there's only me here. It was not until then that Appin noticed that only the chief guard and a few lonely servants were left in the large hall. In an instant, he understood the meaning of the phrase, I might not come back. Traitors again. The King of Dawn gritted his teeth and smashed his scepter on the ground. 1 or 2 are not enough, I want 3 or 4 more. My career is ruined by these traitors. Their departure had indeed been agreed to by him, but what reason did they use to leave? One said he was going to check the defense of the stone wall, and the other said he was going to the inner court to supervise the maids' preparation for war. These were originally their duties, but now it seemed that they were just excuses. Could it be that his minister had already made preparations to escape before the enemy launched their attack? Your Majesty, those cowards will be punished sooner or later, but now the top priority is to evacuate as soon as possible. The chief guard came forward to persuade him. Those mercenaries can't buy too much time. Even the guards can only resist the enemy for about an hour. Any later, and it will be too late. No, I want to see the traitors pay the price with my own eyes. Appin pushed him away and said, Go to the underground dungeon and bring me Otto Luoshi's head. But this is the king's order. He shouted at the top of his voice. Yes, Your Majesty. The chief guard had to take a step back and bow. After the only subordinate left, Appin felt his fingers tremble slightly, and his eyes seemed to be about to split open. Even his whole vision was dyed with a layer of light red. He slowly sat down on the chair and stared at his hands, wishing he could tear these traitors into pieces with them. Everything was over. When the mercenaries at the top of the city wall inexplicably fled and gave up the stone wall, the defeat was already doomed. Count Luoshi's rebellion was just an insignificant stroke. But he did not understand why Earl Luoshi was willing to risk losing his eldest son to betray him. Why did Horford Quinn's ambition receive the unreserved support of the other 2 families? This was completely unreasonable. Although the 3 families in the city of Glow were regarded as a whole, their interests were not exactly the same. In a situation where a slight mistake would lead to eternal damnation, he could not think of anyone who could be so trusted by them. Appin realized that whether it was the city or the 3 big families, they were not as well informed as he thought they were. In the end, he did not manage to wait for the report from his personal guard captain. The ones who pushed open the door of the hall was a group of warriors that Soren had never seen before. The weapons in their hands were still dripping with blood, and there were also many bloodstains on their armor. However, judging from their expressions, there was no trace of fatigue or relaxation after a bloody battle. Instead, they looked relaxed as if they had just experienced a street brawl. The personal guard captain claimed to have resisted for half an hour, but in fact, he could not even hold on for a quarter of an hour. The difference in strength between the 2 sides was too great. Then he saw the usurper, Horford Quinn, who had vowed to assist the Moya family forever. In addition to Earl Quinn, there were 2 other traitors and their successors, Oro Tokat and Otto Luoshi. Seeing the latter, Appin knew that it was impossible for him to retaliate. Why is this? Are you surprised that Otto is still alive? Oro interrupted him. It's not too difficult to hide 2 warriors in the secret passage of the palace, not to mention that ordinary iron gates and fences can't stop them at all. As for how they entered the castle district, you have to ask the guards. I think under the panic, the guards don't care about counting the number of people in the acrobatic troupe. Appin's pupils suddenly shrank. If the other side was not bluffing, wouldn't it mean that they could break into his bedroom at any time? Yes, just as you think. Oro spread out his hands. Oro spread out his hands. If the king of Grey Castle didn't need to create a ruckus, I'm afraid you would have been beheaded by them. To be honest, you've disappointed me, your majesty. I thought you imprisoned Otto just because you were angry. I didn't expect you to use him to threaten Earl Luoshi, and even wanted to kill him. Speaking of this, he sighed. I thought, even if we can't be friends, you won't forget the past. You mean Roland Wimbledon? So all this is a conspiracy planned by him? Appin did not care about the second half of Oro's words at all. He had all his attention on the king of Grey Castle mentioned by Oro. Do you know what you're doing? You've helped a devil. Not only betraying the oath of your ancestors, but also offering your kingdom and people to him. You're so stupid. He pointed angrily at Horford Quinn. And you? Do you really think you can sit on the throne? In fact, you're just a puppet. Haven't you ever thought about the reason why he started this rebellion? If he didn't want to annex the Kingdom of Dawn, why would he go against me again and again? Don't forget, these people can easily overthrow me today, and one day, they will easily push you into the abyss. You're wrong. Suddenly a woman's voice sounded outside the door. He did this only for 2 reasons. One is to save Otto, and the other is to protect the witches. Ridiculous. Appin was about to scold her for her presumptuousness and ignorance, but his voice suddenly got stuck in his throat. You are. The person looked very weak and needed the help of others to barely stand, but even so it could not hide her outstanding appearance. The long blonde hair and the familiar face reminded him of a person that only existed in his memory. Andrea Quinn. However, the other party's answer confirmed his guess. Long time no see, Appin. In an instant, all the questions in the mind of the King of Dawn were answered. Why the Tokat family would support Earl Quinn so firmly, and why Earl Luoshi was willing to take the risk. There was indeed a person who could win the trust of both families at the same time, because their children had fallen in love with each other. The anger in his heart was extinguished, replaced by a sense of despair and helplessness. He murmured for a moment and finally said, Why? Why did you choose them instead of me in the end? If being defeated by Roland Wimbledon was destined, why did you also betray me? I could have given more than them. If it weren't for that accident, half of the kingdom would have been yours. Chapter 944. Appin suddenly froze in place. In other words, the accident many years ago was a hoax deliberately created by Earl Quinn to cover up the news that his daughter had become a witch? Andrea is an evil fallen one, he did not know. But the murderers who murdered his father and stirred up the kingdom were indeed witches. If they did not have such an unreasonable ability, everything would not have become like this. Was it wrong for him to want to avenge his father? 2 thoughts collided and tore at each other in Appin's mind, giving him a splitting headache. Your rule ends here. Earl Quinn took a step forward. In any case, the Kingdom of Dawn should not continue to act according to your will. Witches will be rehabilitated and have the same status and rights as ordinary people. They can walk on the streets normally, hold official positions, inherit the family, and even manage the kingdom. Speaking of this, he glanced at Andrea. As for you, what? Do you want to kill a royal noble? Appin covered his forehead and said with a ferocious face, Have you forgotten the oath you made to the ancestors? Have you forgotten my surname? Answer me, Horford Quinn. This sharp question made everyone present take a step back involuntarily, except for Andrea and the God's Punishment witches. I am the direct descendant of the Moya royal family, and the only heir. Even if I am no longer the king, you will bear the name of the Kingslayer. He hissed, The order of the Kingdom of Dawn will be destroyed in your hands, and those great noble families will no longer trust you. I won't do that, Horford sighed. If it weren't for the family's imminent danger, I wouldn't even want to come to this point. But you must swear to leave the Kingdom of Dawn forever and never set foot on the land of the kingdom in your lifetime. In this case, you can take the people you can and leave the king's city. Otherwise, I can only lock you in the castle dungeon, just like what you did to the eldest son of the Luoshi family. This is the decision made by the 3 families? The Tokat family has no objection. Earl Tokat put his hand on his chest. The same goes for the Luoshi family, Earl Luoshi added. We're not as cold-blooded and heartless as you. Oro Tokat snorted. It's also thanks to your late order otherwise. Now, Otto interrupted. That's enough. What a group of considerate people. But in the face of such a huge difference in power, how long can your laughable friendship last? Appin glanced coldly at the nobles in the hall. After a long silence he said, I choose the former. He could not be imprisoned in a place where he would never see the light of day. As long as his bloodline continued, he would always be a member of the royal family of the Kingdom of Dawn. Whether he went to the Kingdom of Wolfheart or the Kingdom of Everwinter, he would be treated in accordance with his status. Even living under someone else's roof was better than being locked up in a cage. Moreover, neither Horford Quinn nor the King of Greycastle could guarantee that they would not make mistakes. Once there was a dispute, the nobles of other territories would not forget his existence. Then please take the oath. Earl Quinn nodded. When Appin Moya took the oath in the name of his ancestors, the incident finally came to an end. But only Andrea noticed that when the guards took the King of Dawn out of the hall, Elena, who was supporting her, showed a cold smile. When they left the castle, Otto suddenly called out to Andrea from behind. Miss Quinn. Thank you for saving me. Mr. Hill has told me about what happened in Neverwinter, she said with a chuckle. She chuckled. Are you treating me like an outsider when I'm your savior and childhood friend? No. Otto was a little speechless for a moment, but a hint of joy appeared in his eyes. Call me big sister. Oro stepped forward and put his arm around Otto's neck. Don't forget who was the leader of the four at that time. Or do you want to usurp the position? Oro. Otto elbowed the latter in the chest. Ahem. Well, I saw that you were too nervous, so I was just joking. Oro pretended to be shocked. But we haven't seen each other for a long time. Now that the flower of glow has come back to life, we must have a good gathering tonight. How about the usual place? Silver Antler Tavern. Andrea raised her eyebrows. That place hasn't closed yet? It's the property of the Luoshi family. It won't close so soon, although the manager is indeed terrible. Hey, I'm fine with it. Then it's settled. I'll go first. You guys take your time. Oro waved his hand. And Andrea. Otto took a deep breath. I want to talk to you alone. Although he did not know why his old friend was willing to give up this opportunity to spend time with Andrea, it was a rare opportunity for him. He did not want to use Oro to say that he missed her, but he could feel that Andrea's attitude had changed a little when they met in Neverwinter. Although she still seemed to be quite resistant to the identity of the Quinn family's eldest daughter, at least she did not show any unfamiliarity with her former playmate, which could be seen from the joke just now. Andrea seemed to think for a while, and then nodded. Let's go to the courtyard. Otto felt his heart start to beat faster. The helper did not follow them. The two slowly walked into the courtyard, one in front of the other. Are you all right? Looking at the back of the witch who was staggering, Otto wanted to help her, but did not dare to reach out his hand. This was a common thing when they were children. This is just a side effect of using too much magic power. It doesn't have any real effect on the body. On the contrary, we need to use it to increase the capacity of magic power. After a day, we'll be back to normal, so don't worry. Andrea shrugged. Now it's just the two of us. What do you want to talk about? Otto bit his lip and said, Do you remember what I told you in Neverwinter? Every year, Oro will go to your grave to lay flowers. I remember. In fact, there's something I haven't told you. He took a deep breath. I do the same every year, because I can't forget you. When I saw you say, I'm coming in the prison, I could hardly describe the joy in my heart. At that moment, I decided that no matter what, I must say this. Andrea, can you stay here? Andrea didn't seem surprised. She just smiled and said, Thank you, but you said it too late. Too late? What do you mean? I already have someone I want to be with, so I won't stay in the City of Glow. She deliberately replied in a light tone. If you said this 10 years ago, I might have agreed. Otto's heart sank. Is it His Majesty? If it's him, he's indeed a much better choice than me. How can I be an enemy of Nightingale? Andrea interrupted. I'm her strongest ally. No, pretend I didn't say anything. She coughed twice. Anyway, it's not what you think. Otto, witches can't continue the family, and I don't want to be bound by the rules of the nobles. 10 years is too long, and I'm no longer the flower of glow I used to be. So this is good, understand? Otto opened his mouth. He wanted to blurt out, I'm willing to give up everything for the nobles, but an invisible force stopped him. He was no longer a willful child who could cast off all responsibilities. That would be the biggest disappointment to his father and sister Belinda. Chapter 945. 2 days later. In the palace of the City of Glow. You're leaving today? Can't you stay here a little longer? Horford looked at Andrea, who had come to say goodbye, with mixed feelings in his heart. Otto and the others wouldn't want to say goodbye to you as soon as they meet. I've been away from Neverwinter for a long time. There are still people waiting for me there, Andrea said frankly. And now it's the time for the new king to replace the old one. As the heir of the family, they shouldn't waste their time on banquets and entertainment. Since we're friends, it's enough to see each other once. She is indeed different from before, the Earl thought. She has grown up. About the negotiation with Grey Castle. Do you have any suggestions? Horford pondered for a moment. I'd like to hear your opinion. It's very important for the family's decision-making. I don't know much about government affairs. In Neverwinter, the people in charge of these affairs aren't nobles, but free people who have passed the examination. If you want to know more details, it would be more suitable to talk to Hillfox. He has always been in contact with the western region. Andrea paused. If I have to say something, I would say don't make the same mistake as Appin. Horford smiled bitterly. If I still dare to oppose Grey Castle after witnessing the power of Roland Wimbledon, I can't even describe my stupidity. It's not just power. Andrea shook her head. The upcoming Battle of Divine will concern the fate of all mankind. At this time, internal strife will only accelerate our demise. Neither Grey Castle nor the Kingdom of Dawn can survive alone in this catastrophe. In this case, you should know better than me how to maximize the benefits of the family. The greatest benefit is to continue the family. Horford quickly understood what his daughter meant. And the hope of continuing the family now rests on His Majesty, she said, spreading out her hands. So, control the order of the Kingdom of Dawn, stand firmly on Grey Castle's side, and work together to survive the battle of divine will. This is the only advice I can give. Earl Quinn nodded slowly. I see. Just as Andrea turned around, he could not help but call out to her again. You don't need to send me off. I still have a lot of things to do. You don't have to worry about my safety. The gods' punishment witches will return to Neverwinter with me. No, what I want to say is, I'm sorry, daughter. When he said that, Horford suddenly felt a lot older, but he also felt a lot more relaxed. In fact, there were many things he wanted to talk about. For example, he had indeed sent her away for the sake of the family, but it could not be said that he had no intention of protecting her. He also regretted not discussing this matter with Madame in advance. If he could do it all over again, he might not have done it in such a violent way. And when he heard from Otto that she was still alive and living well, his heart surged with joy. It was just that Earl Quinn knew that the damage had already been done. Even if he said those words, they would only be excuses to the other party. This was the price of making a choice. Andrea had grown to such an extent, so he couldn't perform too badly. After that, the old Duke closed his eyes. And then I'll be leaving. His daughter's footsteps gradually faded away, and finally disappeared in his ears. Although he did not hear the words father that he had been expecting, at the same time, her tone was not as cold as it was a few days ago. At least this time, she did not call him Earl. That was good. He thought that this was just a temporary farewell. There would be a time when they would meet again. Time could make people forget, but it could also heal the pain. The choice he made 10 years ago had made him lose a lot. Horford Quinn planned to use the same amount of time to correct this mistake. After leaving Whitecaps Bay, the ship entered the sea. Appin put down the map in his hand and looked out of the porthole. This route was one of the main trade routes to the Wavering Port in the Kingdom of Wolfheart. From time to time, he could see merchant ships coming and going. Occasionally, a fisherman's boat would approach to sell some fresh fish, vegetables and fruits. If he were still the king, he would be surrounded by 3-masted ships flying the royal flag. If he wanted to eat fresh food, maids would naturally bring it to him. It was all because of those damn traitors. It had been almost a week since he was ousted from the throne. During this time, he had been thinking about how to make a comeback. Even if he could not do anything to the king of Grey Castle, at least he could not let the 3 big families lie comfortably in his city and enjoy the fruits of their rebellion. After careful consideration, Appin finally chose his first foothold, the Thousand-Blade Castle in the Kingdom of Wolfheart. It was close to the border of the Kingdom of Dawn. It was rumored that the lord of the castle had blood relations with the nobles of the Kingdom of Dawn, so he should not be too harsh to the Moya family. The most important thing was that the nobles of the 2 places had a close relationship with each other. If someone wanted to use his identity to do something, they could easily contact him. Although those lords were eager to make trouble before, they were all for their own interests. Now that he was no longer the ruler of the City of Glow, there was naturally no basis for conflict. Not only that, but his bloodline could also become a tool for them to seize new interests. In order to take revenge, Appin decided to temporarily put himself down. When the time was right, those who looked down on him would taste the bitter consequences. Thinking of this, he felt a lot more refreshed. At the same time, there was a pang of hunger in his stomach. He decided to eat some fruit first. Once they left the coastal area of the Kingdom of Dawn, this route would be much more deserted. Moreover, he had just heard the sound of fishing boats docking. Appin shook the thin rope in front of the table. It was connected to a bell outside the room. As long as it rang, the maid would answer and come in. However, there was no response from outside. His brows immediately furrowed. Had he fallen so low that even a maid dared to be lazy and perfunctory? In the blink of an eye, his heart was filled with killing intent. Well, if it was really her negligence, it would be good to use her as a warning example. Apart from the members of the Moya family and the knight who had sworn loyalty to him, the rest of the entourage were indeed getting more and more indecent. He wanted to let those people know that even if they were on a ship, as long as he was there, it should be no different from a palace. Appin got up and walked out of the room, but found no one in the corridor. Not only the maid, but also the sailors, guards, slaves. All had disappeared. The cabin was eerily quiet, and only the sound of the sea lapping against the hull could be heard. The hair on his back suddenly stood up. Something was wrong here. Had he been abandoned? No. That was impossible. Even if the mercenaries and servants wanted to abandon him, the night guards trained by the family would definitely stand up to stop them. There should have been at least some noise when the 2 sides argued. Appin was going to climb to the deck from the stairs of the master bedroom in the poop building. In any case, there should be sailors there. But as soon as he turned around, he saw a blood-stained dagger against his neck. The person holding the dagger was an extremely ugly woman, but her eyes were as bright as stars. She was not from the ship. Appin immediately realized that it was impossible for such a unique person to not have any impression in his mind. She was an attacker from outside. Who sent you? Do you know what you are doing, untouchable? I am the King of Dawn, the Moya family. His voice stopped abruptly. He found that he could no longer breathe out through his mouth, and the gushing blood had blocked his throat. The tearing pain extended from his neck to his chest, and the coldness that swept through his body robbed him of all his strength. As he fell, he only heard a casual whisper above his head. Chapter 946. Have you cleaned it up? Elena asked, looking at Zoe, who walked out from below the deck. Yes, it took me some time to find them. She wiped the blood off her face. Fortunately, they're all here. What should we do next? Betty shrugged. Write a report for His Majesty? Let Elena write it. I'm not good at summarizing. Anyway, His Majesty didn't take it seriously. He only said that the overall situation should be stabilized first, and the way to deal with it was up to him. Just write him as a man with ulterior motives who was unwilling to fail. For such a person, it's better to die. That's right. Betty looked confident. If he didn't have ulterior motives, why would he choose a border city closest to the Kingdom of Dawn? His Majesty's attitude is casual, but we can't. Elena cleared her throat. I'll list out the causes, consequences, and analysis in this report, including your statements, just like the minutes of the meeting in the City Hall. You just want to get his appreciation so that you can go to the dream world a few more times. Zoe rolled her eyes. What nonsense are you talking about? Hey, can we do that? I didn't think of that. Betty looked at Elena with her eyes shining. Can you teach me how to write a formal report? We'll talk about it later. Elena coughed twice. Now let's get down to business. That's right. Zoe also put away her teasing look. But don't write this part in the report. I know. Elena turned to look at the other end of the deck, and waved at several men in black robes. Come here. The leading old man walked to the three tremblingly with the help of two men. He bowed and said, Oracle, what can I do for you? Since you're willing to come here with us, it means that you're well prepared, right? Elena asked seriously. He was the creator of black money, the legendary businessman of the city of Glow, Banach Lothar. Although the gods' punishment witches were invincible in battle, they still needed the help of mortals for certain things, such as intercepting Appin at sea and making sure that his death had nothing to do with Grey Castle. To a mortal, regicide was an unimaginable crime, especially to end the bloodline of a royal family. No amount of wealth could offset this ridiculous blood worship, which could be seen from Banach's trembling shoulders. However, he still took this step. This alone was enough to prove his ambition. Yes, I am willing to serve Lord Oracle. Take it easy. Elena patted his shoulder with satisfaction. In the eyes of God, a mortal's identity is meaningless. So what if you're a king? It was just an empty title. Tell me, what do you plan to do next? Banach calmed down a little. Among the three plans, I prefer the first one. Disguising it as a shipwreck is the safest. Every year, dozens of ships will sink on this route due to storms, tsunamis, hitting reefs, and other reasons. Especially on the border section, there will be a rainstorm in 2 days. As long as we drive the ship deeper into the sea and dig through the bottom of the ship, no one will know what happened here. He took a deep breath and continued. As for disguising it as a pirate raid or a noble's revenge, it can't be flawless. Although it can divert people's suspicion to a specific target, a fake is a fake. As long as we investigate carefully, we can always find some clues. Even if we can't find them, those nobles can make some flaws themselves. If it's a shipwreck, are you sure you can make all the clues disappear? Zoe asked coldly. Yes, Your Excellency, Banach said fiercely. The sailors I brought with me will also disappear along with this ship. The people who clean up the mess are silencers trained by black money. They will never leak the news. Silencers? Elena looked at the attendants beside him and asked, Are these two also silencers? You guessed right. They can neither hear nor speak. They need to give orders through specific gestures, which is why they are called silencers. Then they really put in a lot of effort. Elena naturally knew how troublesome it was to train a deaf mute into a fighter. Perhaps only 1 out of 10 deaf mutes could become a fighter. And this was under the condition that they were good seedlings. How could an underground chamber of commerce collect so many deaf mutes with good seedlings? She was afraid that these people had been deliberately made like this by drugs or other means after they were selected. Of course, she did not care about how the common people treated her. Even in the era of the Union, the common people had never given up bullying the weaker ones. This time, I brought 50 silencers with me. They don't listen to anyone but me. It's more than enough to deal with those sailors. This plan is foolproof, Banach said while putting his hand on his chest. Great, let's do it. Elena looked at Zoe and Betty. But I have one more thing for you to do. The old merchant swallowed and said, As long as it's within my ability, I'll do my best. If it was just an accident, there was no need for her to hide it from His Majesty. The following order did not come from Roland, but from Pasha. It's very simple. Black money has made contact with Horford Quinn, the new king of the Kingdom of Dawn. The Chamber of Commerce will continue to support him on the surface, but at the same time, put as many spies as possible into his new regime and secretly monitor every move of the Quinn family. Do you understand? But isn't he a puppet supported by you? Bonnock asked confusedly. This is just a precaution. After all, the common people's willpower is short and fragile, especially when the real challenge comes. Who can guarantee that the puppet's performance will be as good as before? Elena paused. And it's not safe to rely on one family to manage the Kingdom of Dawn. I hope your Black Money Chamber of Commerce can also become a part of it. If a man who yearned for power heard this hint, he would be overjoyed, but Bonnock did not show much joy. Instead, he said worriedly, this requires a long-term plan, and only I can stabilize those partners. But, Oracle, you know my body. Elena took out 2 porcelain bottles from her back and put them in front of Bonnock. Take them. You can drink them when you're not feeling well. But remember, you can't drink these 2 bottles consecutively. The interval must be more than 1 month. With 6 more bottles, your body will meet the basic requirements for the transformation. Bonnock's eyes were suddenly filled with ecstasy. He hurriedly took the porcelain bottles and carefully put them in his arms. Then he bowed deeply and replied excitedly, I'll definitely complete the task you've given me. Chapter 947. After receiving the news that the rescue operation had been a success, Roland finally felt relieved. Although there were some deviations from the original plan, and they failed to conquer the Kingdom of Dawn, the neighboring countries had finally overthrown the Moya family and maintained basic stability. The new Quinn family would be the most loyal ally of Grey Castle, until they gained a firm foothold. Moreover, Neverwinter had Andrea. As long as there were no accidents, the alliance with the Kingdom of Dawn would last for another generation. He did not think that the Third War of Divine Will would last for 100 years. It was estimated that Andrea and the God's Punishment Witches would need about a month to return to the western region. He intended to make good use of this time to plan the future development of Grey Castle. After all, with the destruction of the remnants of Timothy's party, the opposition temporarily disappeared, and the kingdom was nominally unified. Although it would still take some time for the secondary city hall to play its role and completely turn Grey Castle into an efficient centralized country, he could start preparing now. When that day came, the strength of Grey Castle would inevitably increase to an unprecedented level, and the gap between it and the other 3 countries would be widened. The most important thing in the development plan was how to make good use of the witch's ability. After all, they were the primary productive force. In the 2 weeks after Anna returned, the city had undergone a series of changes. The most obvious change was in Roland's castle. His mahogany desk had doubled in size, and there were more than 10 hand-cranked telephones on it, which led to the office of the Witch Building, the city hall, the barracks, the third border city, the Longsong area, and other important places. In case of an emergency, he no longer had to rely on the legs of his personal guards to deliver a message. In addition, the first public telephone had appeared in the central square, which connected the city and the misty forest. As the railway construction progressed, it was extended to meet the needs of the workers who could not return home for a long time. Of course, this line was charged on time, and the number of callers per day was limited, so they had to apply in advance. If they did not want to spend too much money, they could choose to send letters by air or by rail, which were cheaper. Thanks to the popularization of primary education, written communication had become more and more common among the citizens of Neverwinter. The department responsible for the operation of these systems was a newly established department in City Hall, the Communications Department. Since its work involved taking care of messengers and delivering letters to people's homes, its subordinate agencies instantly became a behemoth second only to the Ministry of Construction. It provided about 1,000 jobs in Neverwinter, and almost all of the new graduates were employed. From this department, Roland could already vaguely see the outline of a mega-corporation rising in the future. And this was only the power of Anna alone. Therefore, after solving the demon attack, he focused most of his energy on the ability statistics of the sleeping island witches. With the arrival of the second batch of migrants, The number of members of the sleeping spell had increased to 96. Vendi and Scroll were extremely busy just testing their abilities. Coupled with the fact that there were a few witches who did not cooperate, the first step was quite difficult. Fortunately, thanks to Tilly's personal prestige and Vendi's conciliatory offensive, the registration part was successfully passed. The black leather book placed in front of Roland now was the preliminary result of the witch's ability survey. He had read it repeatedly for several days, and planned the positions of most of the witches. He had to admit that the previous classification of strengthening, summoning, and enchantment types was too general, and not suitable for intuitively expressing the scope of their abilities. Therefore, he simply reclassified the witches according to their job categories. For example, those who were good at processing were classified as manufacturing ability. Those who were closely related to animals were classified as breeding ability. Those who could not find a use for them for the time being were classified as pending. In this way, City Hall could clearly see the number of available witches in the production category. In addition, the nearly 100 witches also showed Roland how amazing the differences in their abilities were. They were all awakened ones, but some could only make flowers grow in the cracks of stones, while some could create burly magic servants. It was no wonder that the Union could not withstand a protracted war. Once a combat witch died, it would take many years to find a replacement. Obviously, the safest way was to place the witches in the factory. Among the 100 people in the list, there were 4 that Roland valued. They were number 26 Dark Cloud, number 43 Ozima, number 44 Doris, and number 89 Slender Wrist. Dark Cloud's ability was dyeing. She could dye any object she came into contact with into any color without changing the original nature of the object. In theory, this should be regarded as a kind of enchantment ability. The duration was limited, and the magic power consumption was greatly affected by the size of the target. After completion, it would not be affected by the God's Stone of Retaliation. However, the strength of her ability was that the effective time of dyeing could be extremely long. Probably because changing the color had little effect on the object itself. She only needed a little magic power to maintain the effect for several years. In other words, if Dark Cloud used all her strength, she could maintain the color for hundreds of years. However, there was still a limit to the size of the target, and she could not release her ability instantly like Hummingbird. At the same time, she could compress the effective time as much as possible. Therefore, once she encountered a large object that exceeded the upper limit of her magic power, the result would be that her ability would be ineffective. It was still too difficult for her to change the color of the sea in one breath. In fact, according to Vendi's test, she could at most affect an object within the range of her arms, which was about 1.5 square meters. For Roland, such a large dyeing area was enough. After all, objects could be divided and combined. It could be said that Dark Cloud's ability made up for a gap in Neverwinter, the development of dye technology. In this era, the dyeing method was derived from natural extraction, which would definitely be a big selling point in advertisements in the future. However, the fact was that the performance of naturally extracted dyes was terrible. They had a lot of impurities, were easy to fade, had poor antioxidation resistance, and were very rare. As a result, only the nobles could afford colorful clothes, and the latter's effect was mostly made by inlaying gold and silver. Dyes were widely used. In addition to the traditional textile industry, education, printing, chemical industry, biology and other fields were inseparable from the support of dyes. Moreover, to a certain extent, Dark Cloud could also relieve Soroya's burden. She could be regarded as a versatile person. However, the following witches, number 43 and number 44, gave Roland a slight headache. Ozima and Doris were 2 of the witches that Vendi mentioned were not very cooperative. When they first met, they had expressed their dissatisfaction with Tilly, and wanted to leave Neverwinter as soon as possible. Although this disagreement was temporarily resolved by Scroll, the rift still existed. It was still unknown whether the 2 were willing to accept the recruitment, and devote themselves to work. Chapter 948. To put it simply, The former could be traced back to the entirety of a substance that had been stripped from a whole body. It could also be traced back to the point where a large amount of it converged through a certain trace element. For the witches of Sleeping Island, this was undoubtedly a kind of survival ability. For example, as long as Ozima held a drop of fresh water in her hand, she could lead them to a stream or a lake. Another example was that she could determine the location and size of an orchard based on the seeds left in animal excrement. Because of her great contribution to the team, several witches from the eastern region gathered together under her leadership, forming a rather tight small group. However, in Roland's eyes, tracing the origin was undoubtedly a direction to excavate natural resources. It was even more versatile than Sylvie's Eye of Magic. The reason was very simple. When Sylvie used her Eye of Sight, her magic power consumption would increase exponentially, and the distance she could cover would be greatly reduced. She could divide the ore seams in the North Slope mine, but once it was a vein buried deep underground, she would be powerless. In addition, even if it was a shallow resource, it was difficult for her to distinguish the type and size of the target. At most, she could only say that there was something underground, but she could not tell what it was. Ozima did not have this concern at all. Not only could she accurately locate a single resource, but she could also clearly know its quantity. If used together with Lucia's purification ability, she might be able to move the entire periodic table of elements to the map of Grey Castle. When Roland was studying geography, his deepest impression was of a national map full of various resources. Now that Grey Castle had been unified in name, he should also work in this direction and expand the source of raw materials to the whole country, even to the Kingdom of Dawn and the fertile plains. But even if Ozima was unwilling to help, it was not difficult for Neverwinter. After all, the resources would not run away. As long as he had enough time, he would eventually achieve this goal. Doris's demonization was different. Limited by the lack of observation methods, he did not even have a basic understanding of magic power. If he wanted to better control it, witches were the only way. Demonification was such an incredible ability. The description that Vendi wrote in the book was that it could allow the magic attached to dead objects to form a cycle, thus greatly slowing down the exhaustion, making it seem as if it was alive. Roland had reservations about this evaluation. He knew that the witch's statement that inanimate objects couldn't have magic power was just a habitual statement. Although in most cases, this law would be effective, there was an exception, and that was the God's Stone of Retaliation. Isabella and Agatha's joint experiment showed that the God's Stone did indeed possess magic power, or rather, the ability to attract magic power. This was originally an exclusive characteristic of awakened ones. When Isabella wiped out the interference area of the God's Stone, she could see a very subtle magic residue on its surface, but it could only last for a few seconds. During the entire process, there was no third party injecting mana into it, so the remaining mana must have belonged to the God's Stone itself. In other words, although the God's Stone of Retaliation didn't possess a high concentration of magic power that could render other abilities ineffective like he had previously speculated, it did indeed contain magic power. It was just that the amount was extremely small. As for why it could isolate the effects of other abilities, Roland could at least be sure of one thing. The statement that magic power repels inanimate objects was not entirely correct. Considering that the God's Stone would soon become an ordinary stone after Isabella's adjustment, Agatha made a bold conjecture. The magic power of the God's Stone of Retaliation would continue to be lost, but it could constantly absorb new magic power like a living thing, forming a cycle. Just like the gravel on the beach, it absorbed the sunlight during the day to heat up and released it at night. Otherwise, it would be impossible to explain how Isabella's ability completely changed the nature of the God's Stone. Even though it did not involve the structure of the God's Stone of Retaliation, she believed that the God's Stone had been killed by Isabella. Vendi's statement obviously followed Agatha's conclusion. Roland did not take it seriously. He had always believed that the God's Stone vein was a kind of inanimate object. The fact that it could absorb magic power had nothing to do with whether it was alive or dead. The reason why the God's Stone vein was unclear was that humans knew too little about the microscopic world before the invention of the microscope. Therefore, in his eyes, Demonization could also be said to be a kind of god petrification. Of course, no matter what the truth was, the effect of this ability was unquestionable. Tests showed that it could be effective on magic stones, sigils, enchanted objects and other objects, so that the magic power instilled in them would be automatically replenished, which was to say a cycle. For example, a Dawn Eye copper rod filled with magic power could continuously generate electricity for 5 days. When Mystery Moon held the broken sword, the time could be extended to about half a month. But no matter what, the magic power endowed by the rod would always be lost, and it would never stay on the enchanted object. This meant that even if Mystery Moon's magic power was equal to that of Anna's, she could only multiply the power of Dawn Eye by a few times. Not to mention large-scale application. She could not even meet the needs of the factory's lighting and equipment operation. Dawn Eye, which had been demonized by Doris, could automatically absorb magic power from everywhere to replenish the consumed gap, so that the effect of magnetic pole conversion could last for a long time. Although the gains and losses were not exactly equal, for a short-term enchantment, the improvement was already amazing enough. It meant that Mystery Moon could get rid of the work of charging and maintenance, and become an energy producer. It meant that many places other than the factory could also use a stable power source. At the same time, many originally useless enchantment abilities would also be reborn because of demonization. Even Agatha and Isabella could get a pile of similar god stones as test subjects, which would be very helpful for further research on magic power. As for the shortcomings such as the long casting time, low efficiency, and the interruption of the magic power circulation by the god stone, they were nothing compared to the ability itself. Therefore, Roland wanted to keep witches like this, no matter what. After thinking about it, he could only try to use sugar-coated bullets to attack. After all, when it came to seducing people, he had never seen anyone better than himself. The last one, Slender Wrist number 89, lived up to her name. Originally the daughter of a jeweler, she was born to be good at carving. Not only was her wrist slender, but her hands were also very good, so she could carve complex patterns on the ring. After the awakening of her ability, this talent had made great progress. Not only did her carving speed greatly increase, but she could also use it on any material. At first glance, Anna's Blackfire could also do this easily, but she was after all a genius who had advanced twice. In the Union, she belonged to the top senior witches, so she was not at the same level as Roland. Chapter 949. Roland closed the book and heaved a sigh of relief. The arrival of a large number of Sleeping Island witches would undoubtedly inject immeasurable vitality into the industrial manufacturing industry of Neverwinter, but there were currently several thorny problems in front of him. The biggest one was the problem of remuneration. They belonged to Sleeping Spell and were, in principle, under the leadership of Tilly. Whether they were willing to accept employment or not depended on their own will. Although Tilly's attitude towards him had changed greatly, Roland felt that it was really hard for him to take back his previous promise and use his relationship with Tilly to order the witches around. In other words, the job planning in the book was only his own plan. How much of it could really be realized depended on how many witches in Sleeping Spell were willing to devote themselves to the tide of production. Nagging them with slogans such as "labor is the most glorious" and "labor changes fate" would certainly have little effect, and saying things like "for home" was even less meaningful. For them, the only place that could be called home was probably Sleeping Island. Roland believed that as long as one lived here for a few years, anyone would fall in love with this city and regard it as their own. But now was not the time. For newcomers, it was normal to subconsciously be vigilant and worried about a strange place. He could not wait for a few years to develop the industry, so in the end, it was still based on the remuneration. In short, there must be a desire to drive them to work. He had previously inquired from Tilly that the witches on Sleeping Island provided bounty services to merchants or explorers in the fjords. The price was quite expensive, and most of the bounty services ranged from dozens to hundreds of golden dragon. Although the money was used by Tilly to purchase basic living necessities, the witches still used the original fixed distribution system and lived in poverty, But it did not mean that they had never seen money. Moreover, now that 30% of the golden dragon earned from the chaos drinks trade was at Tilly's disposal, it was foreseeable that she would take out a small part to improve the living standards of her witches. In other words, even if the witches did not work, they would not starve to death, and would even live a much better life than on the island. Therefore, relying on a few golden dragon might not be enough. Moreover, Roland was not afraid of low pay, but he was afraid of competition. Most of the witch union's salaries were between 1 to 3 golden dragon stones. Why should outsiders pay more? Even if the latter's salary was raised, it would easily attract criticism. The salary hasn't changed much in almost 2 years, but the Sleeping Island witches have raised it as soon as they came. Does the treatment of the old have to be raised by the newcomers? Even if the alliance members didn't say that, Roland wasn't willing to do that. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but look at Nightingale, who was lying on the recliner and flipping through a comic book. Sensing his gaze, Nightingale turned around slightly. What's wrong? A perfect curve. No, now is not the time to think about this. Roland cleared his throat. How long have you been here? More than 2 years, 11 months, and 26 days. Nightingale sat up straight. Why do you ask? So precise. I remember that you were paid 2 golden dragon stones a month at the beginning, right? At that time. She revealed an ambiguous smile. Yes, twice as much as Anna, and I refused. Later, you begged me repeatedly, and I reluctantly agreed to be your personal guard. What begging? It's obvious that you saw Anna pass her day of adulthood safely. You went back to dissuade Kara, and then fell out with her, so you decided to stay. Roland secretly rolled his eyes. During these years, have you ever felt that your efforts weren't proportional to your gains? Have you ever considered leaving? What are you trying to say? The smile on Nightingale's face suddenly froze, and was replaced by a trace of panic. Why should I leave? No, it's just an analogy. Roland immediately realized that this sentence could easily cause ambiguity, so he quickly corrected himself. The point is the first half of the sentence. Will there be witches who think that the salary is too low? After confirming that he was serious, Nightingale seemed to be relieved and appeared in front of his table. How is that possible? 1 golden dragon is already half a year's income for ordinary people. We don't work harder than those workers, so naturally, it's not proportional. Besides, even if we get a sum of money, we don't know where to spend it. After all, we don't have to worry about food and clothing. This kind of life is already unimaginable in the past. Perhaps not all witches think so. That's strange. If you don't believe me, you can ask Vendi. Nightingale said confidently. She knows more about the sisters than I do. Okay. Roland shrugged. I also need her opinion on this matter. What matter? She asked curiously. It's a secret, but you'll know soon. Roland smiled. Your Majesty, I've never thought so. Unexpectedly, Vendi's reaction was even more intense after she came. Even if you don't give me a salary, I still want to build this place well. I once said that Neverwinter is the new holy mountain for witches, and the other sisters also have the same expectation to serve you. If City Hall is short of money, I'm willing to give you all the golden dragon I've saved. Oh well, I'm just collecting opinions. Roland suddenly felt a little touched. He touched his nose and turned his head away. Is there anything in particular that you want? Well, Vendi was stunned for a moment, while Nightingale quickly blinked at her. If I have to say, I think, well maybe, if I could have 1 more bottle of chaos drink every month, that would be great. You too? Roland looked at Nightingale. Are you playing a wishing game? Nightingale chuckled. Since you're just saying, I think 2 bottles would be better. As expected, he had a general framework for the reform of witches' remuneration in his mind. If there was anything more precious than money, it would be the things that money could not buy. Although there were many witches patronizing Evelyn's 100 Flavors wine house, the high prices made most of them flinch, and they would instead choose the cheaper fruit wine. It wasn't that they couldn't afford it, but their consumption philosophy would prevent them from investing large amounts of gold royals in such luxury goods. Moreover, the chaos drinks sold in the winehouse were all old varieties, and the low sales made it difficult to replace the stock. In terms of freshness, it was not as good as the new products released every month. What if the chaos drinks, which were originally a welfare benefit, became a special purchase item? It could be called a point system or a dual currency system. Witches could get exclusive rewards through work, and then use this reward to exchange for something that Golden Dragon could not buy. Wouldn't the work itself be attractive? At the same time, it could avoid the feeling of disparity caused by raising the salary. In addition, chaos drinks weren't the only special items he could purchase. He had countless ideas in his head that could ensure that they wouldn't be imitated by others as long as they were attractive enough. There was no one else he could find that could do it. Chapter 950. After finalizing the payment, Roland planned to tear down another obstacle on the road to great development. That was to formulate standard units. The universal education in Neverwinter had already incorporated millimeters, centimeters, meters, kilometers and other units into the textbooks to replace the original inches, feet and feet, which was quite effective. Especially in the construction and industrial production departments, measuring instruments made with the new units were more accurate and had been widely accepted. The 1 centimeter standard prototype, which was an iron bar as wide as Roland's fingernail, was kept in the castle study. What he needed to do next was to integrate the other units and promote them to the whole country of Grey Castle. The reason why he took this step now was that the previous production and education levels were not urgent for other new units, and it was difficult to replicate the technology. After all, it was meaningless to have standards. If they could not be made into measuring instruments, people would not be able to use them in real life. But now, these difficulties were no longer a problem. For example, 1 cubic decimeter container was defined as 1 liter, and 1 liter of water was defined as 1 kilogram. Another example was to define 1 meter-long pendulum's period as 1 second. The former could use a hummingbird to accurately replicate a kilogram prototype of the same weight, and the latter could be used to measure time using a pendulum clock. As long as there were prototypes and models, the factories in Neverwinter could produce a large number of replicas. Otherwise, it would be a waste of time and energy to rely on Anna to make all the measuring instruments. When the industrial technology reached a certain level, the popularization of more accurate measurement units became a matter of course. He was not worried that these standards were not pure enough. In fact, the standard prototypes used in human history were constantly changing with the progress of the times. 3 days later, Iron Axe finally led the Eastern Front army back to Neverwinter. At the same time, Echo, who had been in the port of Clearwater for nearly half a year, arrived. Roland looked at the 2 Sand Nation people who were reporting to him in front of his desk and sighed slightly in his heart. Both of them were originally sinners who had been exiled from their families. One had concealed his identity and wandered to Border Town, relying on hunting for a living. The other had been sold as a slave and lived a tormented life. But now they were indispensable members of the senior management of Neverwinter. Iron Axe, who had shouldered the heavy responsibility alone and had been busy outside for several months, did not show any signs of fatigue on his face. On the contrary, he was in high spirits because of the war, and his every movement was like that of a general. Echo's change was even more obvious. The shadow that her life as a slave had cast on her gradually faded away. Her blue-gray eyes were now shining with confidence, and her temperament was more and more in line with her position as the chief of Wuxia. Sure enough, experience could change a person. Echo's report was very simple. The Wild Flame clan had fulfilled their agreement, and the first batch of migration teams had already settled in the port of Clearwater. Influenced by the number 1 clan in Iron Sand City, many other small clans came to her and expressed their willingness to work for the great chief. The whole plan went very smoothly. By the end of the year, the population of the port of Clearwater was estimated to reach 30,000 people, which was already comparable to the population of the old King's City. She also brought a letter from Spear, the Lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge. It was obvious that she was here to ask for food. Spear said that she's just the manager of a small fief, and doesn't have any experience in taking care of so many people. She's been under a lot of pressure recently. Echo imitated Spear's tone and said, although the experienced people sent by City Hall are useful, according to their suggestion, we need at least 200 to 300 clerks to accommodate so many migrants. If your Majesty doesn't take care of her, she'll have the urge to throw away her burden and run to Neverwinter to be a common witch. Roland could not help but chuckle. Being a common witch doesn't mean being idle. So Roya and Leaf are waiting for you. If you don't use up your magic power every day, how can you be worthy of the magic channel? I see. I'll give her more of the new officials who passed the review. You've worked hard this time. Take a good rest for a few days. Yes. She bowed and then asked expectantly, by the way, Your Majesty, have you recently composed any new songs? You can sing all of the previous ones? Yes. They're very effective, especially when it comes to inspiring people, Echo replied with a smile. And when I'm confused, I'll sing the songs you taught me. If it weren't for those songs, I'm afraid I wouldn't have lasted until today. It seemed that coordinating relations between clans and maintaining order in the Southern Territory was not as easy as she had reported. But she had borne all the difficulties and setbacks alone. I see, Roland said slowly. I'll have someone copy the new songs and send them to your room. Echo bowed deeply and said, that's great. Thank you. Even if he knew nothing about music, he could still search for it in the dream world. He could not say no to such a request. After Echo left, Roland looked at Iron Axe. You've worked hard too. No, Your Majesty. Iron Axe hurriedly put his hand on his chest and said, it's my duty to fight for you. Not only did I not feel tired, but I actually enjoyed it. Really? Roland smiled and did not deny it. What happened to the nobles who fled to Swordsmanship? You didn't burn them down again, did you? I wanted to do that, but they ran too fast, Iron Axe said seriously. By the time the First Army cleared Valencia and arrived at Swordsmanship, the suburbs had become a wasteland. Not only that, but several granaries in the city were also set on fire. Obviously, they would rather destroy the city than hand it over to you intact. This was probably the last revenge of the Rebel King's faction. He thought that if the Eastern Front Army hadn't made sufficient preparations and had dozens of cement carriers working day and night to provide supplies, they would have had no choice but to retreat at this point. Otherwise, the city people who lacked food would regard the First Army as a target to loot. Once they fired, it would be difficult to restore order. Where did they escape to? Some to the fjords and some to the other three kingdoms, Iron Axe replied regretfully. It's a pity that the First Army doesn't have ships. Otherwise, I wouldn't have let them go. Don't worry. As long as they dare to use their original surnames, I'll get rid of them sooner or later, Roland said slowly. At least those who fled to the Kingdom of Dawn were no different from flies who threw themselves into a trap. This group of people was probably Timothy's last loyal followers. He was not worried that they would make a comeback. He just felt that they were an eyesore. After asking about the aftermath of the Eastern region, Roland suddenly thought of a previous question. By the way, tricking the nobles into prison, and then pretending to burn them down. Is this your idea? Chapter 951. By the way, let's talk about the update. Some people always say that I write slowly, that I'm arrogant and complacent, that I don't put the readers in my eyes. I'm really June Flying Snow. I'm wrongly accused. The truth is, I spend 4 to 5 hours a day on writing. It's always hard to satisfy myself by cutting and subtracting, and that doesn't include the time to think. Every time I ask for leave, I'm anxious and uneasy. Every time I'm stuck, I'm mentally exhausted. Especially now that the plot has reached this stage, there are always a lot of things to consider. Naturally, my speed is not as fast as before. I don't want to fail this book, nor do I want to not fill in the gaps. My ability is limited, and I've never written such a long story before. But I still want to write it well, and show this world that I've been imagining for a long time to everyone. I know that this speed is not suitable for the pace of online literature, so I don't want to ask for monthly votes or tips. I only hope that everyone can accompany me to the end. Chapter 952. Your Majesty, I. To Roland's surprise, Iron Axe did not blurt out the answer as he usually did. Instead, he seemed rather hesitant, which was rare for the commander-in-chief of the First Army. Roland had only asked casually, but now he became interested. He didn't think that Iron Axe had any ulterior motives. Moreover, being fully in charge of Iron Axe included the means of punishment, so there was no essential difference between burning or hanging. What he was curious about was that since it wasn't a violation of the order, the other party's hesitation was worth pondering. However, he did not continue to pressure Iron Axe. He just leaned back in his chair and waited for Iron Axe's answer. After hesitating for a while, Iron Axe suddenly knelt down and said, "No, Your Majesty. It was Miss Edith who proposed the plan to eliminate the enemy nobles, but I was the one who carried it out, so I should take full responsibility." Edith? Roland was stunned. Is this the plan of the General Staff? No, I did not see anything related to this in the plan, so. Is it a private message? In an instant, he understood the reason for the other party's hesitation. In this era where private soldiers were prevalent, anything related to the army was a taboo for the Lord. It was taboo for outsiders to intervene, even if it was a suggestion or reminder that would help the war. If this had happened in the territory of other nobles, the one who proposed it in private would have been punished. Iron Axe did not want to implicate Edith, nor did he want to cover it up with a lie, so he hesitated. I see. You handled the war on the Eastern Front very well. City Hall will give you a reward according to the results of the war. You can go now. Iron Axe was stunned and asked, Your Majesty, won't you punish me? Roland could not help laughing and asked, Why? Did you violate any of the rules? My order is to eliminate the rebels in the eastern region and bring their cities under my rule. You can act according to the circumstances. He paused. If you heard two of your soldiers discussing the war situation while you were patrolling the camp, and you took their advice, should I punish you and these two people? Besides, Edith is a member of the General Staff, so it's normal for her to have ideas about the war plan. So you think we're not at fault? Iron Axe couldn't help but raise his head. I didn't say that. Roland shrugged. Just because you don't have any problems doesn't mean Edith doesn't. But what happens next has nothing to do with you. Go back and have a good rest. Iron Axe opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he chose to obey the order under Roland's gaze. Yes, Your Majesty. As soon as the commander-in-chief of the First Army left, Roland immediately called the city hall. Tell Edith to come to the castle. In less than a quarter of an hour, the Pearl of the Northern Region appeared at the office door. Your Majesty, this is my responsibility, Edith said. I'm willing to accept any punishment you give me. Roland looked at her with interest. I haven't even opened my mouth and you already know what I'm going to say. As soon as the Eastern Front Army returns to Neverwinter, the first person you summon will definitely be Iron Axe. If he hadn't reported to you about the burning of the nobles, I don't think you would have summoned me so quickly. It's so easy to talk to smart people, Roland thought. Moreover, looking at her magnanimous appearance, he could not help but feel that she was a loyal minister who was wronged for the country. However, the smarter a person was, the easier it was to fall into a dead end that he had built himself. First of all, I asked him about this. After all, it's not his style to trick the nobles together and then disguise it as a fire scene. Besides, since you feel that you're responsible, what's the problem? I made an informal appointment with the commander-in-chief of the First Army, and I didn't apply to you. Wrong, Roland interrupted her directly. Your problem is that you violated the regulations of the advisor department. According to the regulations, any battle plan must be recorded on paper and submitted to me for review. Edith obviously did not expect him to say this. She could not help but widen her eyes. Your Majesty? Isn't it? But the Pearl of the Northern Region looked puzzled. Once it's carried out in your name, won't it become your doing in the eyes of other officials? You're right. Roland raised the corner of his mouth. What's the problem? This. Like Iron Axe, Edith also showed a rare look of confusion. Although they're rebels, they're also nobles. In the eyes of some nobles, I'm afraid what you did. I know what you want to say. Roland waved his hand. But if even I can't handle it, do you think you can bear the backlash? Relax. I just want to discuss with you. Do you really think it's right to make your subordinates take the blame when there's a problem? Take the blame? Ahem, you can think of it as shirking responsibility. Roland explained stiffly. Back to this matter. I did it for the Kingdom of Grey Castle. In the end, not only did I not get the honor, but I also had to die because of it. But I felt at ease and even applauded. If other people knew, would those officials still be loyal to me? Edith fell silent. So the king is the most suitable person to take the blame. Only in this way, the subordinates will not have any burden when they do things. Because of this, I need to review the final plan of the advisor department. Even if it's something I'm not good at. Do you understand? After a while, the Pearl of the Northern Region nodded and responded, I was too arrogant. The punishment for violating the regulations is that all the credit for this two-front offensive will be revoked, and you could have been promoted. Roland took a sip of tea. This matter ends here. You can continue with your work. Yes, please allow me to leave. Edith placed her hand on her chest and bowed. So, you've worked for nothing this time? Cole Kant carefully pushed the honey mushroom in front of Edith, and then watched as she stabbed her fork into the mushroom slices. The other colleagues were promoted, but you didn't? Yes, I didn't. The Pearl of the Northern Region chewed on the brown bird beak mushroom, as if she was venting her dissatisfaction with her dinner. Listen to what His Majesty said. If even I can't withstand it, can you withstand it? It's precisely because I can't withstand it that I need an outlet. Of course, if it was a lord like my father, I would never do this. I knew that His Majesty would not ignore it, so I felt that this investment wouldn't be too bad, and the risk was manageable. But with a few words he dispelled all my plans. He even said that I was thinking too much. Are all idealists so naive? Sister, are you angry? Cole wiped the sweat off his forehead. Why? Can't you tell? Edith stared at him. Cole quickly shrank his neck. It was the first time he saw his sister show such an expression on a non-banquet occasion. After living with her for more than 10 years, Cole clearly knew how much his sister loved power. If it was really as she said, and she had lost a chance to be promoted because of this, it would be normal for her to be angry, resentful, or disappointed. But her expression told him otherwise. It was more like a strange smile mixed with anger. And if he did not get it wrong, this kind of complaint was usually called a coquettish grumble. Thinking of this, Cole could not help but shiver. The Pearl of the Northern Region, who was always indifferent or scheming against her opponents, could actually grumble? And unlike her pretense at the banquet, she seemed to be completely unaware of her current expression. Was this still the Edith Kant he was familiar with? Edith did not get an answer for a long time. She dangerously narrowed her eyes. Cole immediately felt the hair on his back stand up. No, she was still his sister. There was no mistaking it. I just think His Majesty might have his own considerations? Let him be. The Pearl of the Northern Region put the last piece of mushroom into her mouth. I'd like to see how high an idealist can go. But what? Cole had a vague premonition. Chapter 953. The new sleeping spell was not just a single building, but a residential area covering an area of about 7,000 square meters. As a key new residential area, it was not only equipped with artesian running water and heating, but also a 4-story frame house with well-developed concrete casting technology. Its interior division was exactly the same as that of the Witch Building. In addition, Roland had also built a 2-story conference hall in the center of the community for the witches of Sleeping Island to carry out their activities. In fact, on the night before the migrants arrived in Neverwinter, the welcome banquet was held here. After half a month, the hall was once again full of witches. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Tilly walked to the podium and began to read the recruitment order from Roland Wimbledon, as well as a new salary system. This is the current work arrangement. The sleeping spell can get 30% of the income generated by the witches. The money will be used to improve everyone's life, expand the scale of the sleeping spell, and other aspects that will be needed in the future. Princess Tilly smiled and said with fervor and assurance, "At first glance, it seems that I'm being exploited by my brother. After all, when we were on Sleeping Island, the commission paid by the fjord's merchants all belonged to us. But in fact, the merchants would also take the opportunity to put forward many additional conditions, such as buying their food and daily necessities at a high price, and often giving us a discount. But there aren't so many additional conditions here. In addition, the 30% given by Roland is already more than the income of Sleeping Island. In addition, most of the new work only needs to consume magic power, and we don't have to personally go to the unknown sea to take risks, so it's much easier. Comparing the two, we can conclude that I'm not the one being exploited. And it can even be said that I'm taking advantage of my brother." This sentence caused a low burst of laughter. "But," Tilly suddenly raised her voice, "all this has nothing to do with the remuneration that I'm going to talk about. Previously, no matter how much the remuneration was paid by the fjord's merchants, the sleeping spell, which lacked everything, could only use it as a whole. So in the end, only bread, cotton and other things were distributed uniformly to everyone. But this time, everyone will get a tangible return, instead of a series of invisible and intangible numbers. As for how to use them, it's your freedom. Now, please open the envelopes on your tables." Molly had long noticed the envelope stamped with the seal of the Grey Castle Tower, but she refrained from touching it. Now that she heard Royal Highness Tilly's request, she couldn't wait to tear open the envelope. "This is the new Gwent deck?" Shadow, who was sitting at the side, craned his head over. "You have one too? Go look at yourself." Molly turned her body to the side, blocking his gaze. Tisk. Inside the envelope was a piece of paper the size of a palm. It looked extremely smooth, but it was bumpy to the touch. It could be easily bent, but it would not leave creases like ordinary paper. The moment Molly saw it, she fell in love with it. It was a work of art. Although it was similar in size to the popular Gwent cards in the Witch Union, she did not think the two were the same. It was because the latter was simply too exquisite. Not only were the patterns gorgeous, but they were also extremely complicated, as if they were lines drawn with strands of hair. And these lines were not only used to fill the surface of the paper, but also formed a variety of patterns and words. For example, the front of the paper was the emblem of a tower and a spear, and the back was a mountain illuminated by the rising sun. Below the patterns were written the words, "Issued by the royal family of Grey Castle," and "Exclusive for witches," and the other four corners were written with 3 tens and an unknown symbol. What Molly loved the most was that when she slowly turned the paper, the patterns on both sides would refract gold under the light, as if the lines were carved out of gold. It doesn't seem to be Gwent." Shadow also noticed the difference. "I remember the numbers on the cards are marked on the same side. Is this a gift from His Majesty?" But Lady Tilly clearly said it was a reward. "Well, yours is the same." Orbit, who was on the other side, also came over. "It should be the same for everyone. What does this symbol mean?" "I don't know, but I feel like I've seen it somewhere before." Whispers rose and fell in the hall. All the witches were attracted by the gorgeous paper in their hands, and only when Tilly spoke again did the discussion slightly subside. "The thing in your hands is called paper money. Just like the name, it has the same function as money. The difference is that this kind of paper money is only issued to witches, and can only be used by witches." "You mean it's a golden dragon made of paper?" someone asked. "There's no harm in understanding it that way, but it can be used to buy some things that the golden dragon can't easily buy." Tilly nodded. "For example, the $10 paper in your hands can be exchanged for a whole bottle of chaos drink or 5 strawberry ice creams in the castle district." Molly couldn't help but swallow her saliva. She still deeply remembered the delicious food she had eaten at the welcome banquet. It could be said that she had never imagined the taste of it in her life. Especially the latter, the round pink color, the soft and cold texture, and the sweet and enchanting aroma, almost put together all the beautiful words she could think of. Compared with the ice cream, the fishy salted fish soup on the fjord islands could not even be called food. And this beautiful paper money could be exchanged for unforgettable delicious food. And in fact, it was 5 servings? Judging from the lively response in the hall, she was not the only witch who was very interested in this. Of course, the things you can exchange for are not only food, but also daily clothes, things you use. As long as it's a new product made in Neverwinter, it will first appear in the shops in the castle district. Tilly then said loudly, "In short, the paper money is the reward for responding to the recruitment. According to the different working hours, the reward will also vary. I have to point out that it's not a necessity for living. Even if you don't work, you can live a comfortable life. To be precise, it's an embellishment, or a reward to make life richer. Therefore, the choice is up to you. Whether you accept the recruitment or not, it's up to you." Unexpectedly, there was no noisy discussion in the hall, probably because they knew that their leader still had something to say, so all the witches focused their attention on Tilly. "But my sisters, this matter is not only about enjoyment." Tilly's tone softened. "Do you remember the unfair treatment we suffered after we awakened as witches? At that time, I'm afraid that everyone had the same thought. It would be great if there was a place where witches and ordinary people could live together." Chapter 954. Molly couldn't help but nod. In the past half a month, what impressed her the most was the attitude of the ordinary citizens towards witches. They were not pretending to be familiar with her, nor were they indifferent to her. Instead, they were half curious and half used to it. A few days ago, when she was wandering in the harbor area, a gust of wind blew down the empty wooden boxes on the pier. She subconsciously summoned her magic servant to catch the falling boxes. Not only did the busy crowd not run away screaming, but they also showed great interest in this transparent legless giant. This was an unprecedented experience for Molly. Even in Sleeping Island, the islanders who had migrated here had never been so close to witches. Although they still followed Princess Tilly's orders on the surface, in fact, witches were still different in their hearts. Most of the fjord's people kept a respectful distance from witches. Only explorers and some businessmen did not mind the power they possessed. As for the mainland of the kingdom, which was deeply influenced by the church, it was even worse for them. When Lotus first brought back the news of the western region of Grey Castle, Molly was still skeptical. It was not until she came here that she realized those stories were too conservative. Especially when she saw Lotus leading a large group of people to climb up and down tall buildings, Evelyn running a tavern that was always very lively at any time, and Candle, who used to be regarded as a useless person, was welcomed by the people in the factory. Molly felt a trace of sincere envy. If it were not for fear of disturbing Princess Tilly, Molly would have taken the initiative to find a job. Anyway, she had never been idle when she was on Sleeping Island. In addition, don't forget that we still have the biggest enemy, the demons. Tilly looked around. You already know the meaning of the Battle of Divine Will. Even the Church of Hermes is not worth mentioning in front of such an enemy. Therefore, not all of you work for your own pleasure. Every note represents your contribution to Neverwinter, and even the entire human world. For witches, this will be an honor, because everyone can use this opportunity to prove to the world that witches are also an indispensable part of the human race, even an important part. She raised her right hand and clenched her fist. Sisters who are willing to be recruited, please come to the stage now. A total of 69 out of 86 jobs have been accepted. This result should be pretty good. After the meeting, Tilly handed the list to Vendi and said, "Most of the remaining observers are hesitant. If we give them more time, I believe more people will accept Neverwinter's recruitment." "It's more than good," Vendi said excitedly. "It's beyond His Majesty's expectations." "Oh," Tilly asked curiously. "How much did he guess?" Vendi smiled and held up 3 fingers. 30 people? Tilly said indignantly. "He's underestimating the sleeping spell." Rather than saying that he underestimated everyone's enthusiasm, it is better to say that it is your credit. Vendi put away her smile and bowed seriously to Princess Wu. "You did not have to say the latter words. If it was just a simple introduction of the recruitment process, 30 people might be an optimistic guess. However, It was Tilly's words of "for the sake of other sisters and to improve the reputation of witches" that moved most of the people present. As a former caretaker of the Witch Cooperation Association, Vendi naturally knew what her companions lacked the most. Apart from a stable place to live, the rest was the recognition of others. After all, they had lived as ordinary people for more than 10 years, and it was not so easy to completely cut off the past. I said that for myself. Tilly smiled and shook her head. I saw a lot of interesting things from Roland, and I also know what an incredible city this is. If we lose the battle of divine will, won't all these things be lost? So even if I want to see more miracles, I have to do my part. Before the doomsday winter comes, it's wise to hug each other tightly to keep warm, isn't it? You're right. Vendi also smiled. It's a pity that not everyone will agree with me. Tilly shrugged helplessly. For example, those witches in the eastern region. It's very likely that they won't accept the recruitment in the end. You mean the small group headed by Azima? Vendi was puzzled. Since she doesn't get along with you, why did she go to the fjords with you? It wasn't like that at the beginning. Princess Wu sighed. Long before they joined Sleeping Island, they knew the Bloodfang Association. During the escape, the latter helped them many times to repel the church's pursuers. Therefore, Azima and the others trusted Heidi Morgan very much. This was nothing, but later, as the conflict between the Bloodfang Association and the sleeping spell broke out, a rift appeared. I see. And I directly attacked Heidi without informing everyone, which made Azima even more resentful. So when they asked to board the Sleeping Beauty to leave Sleeping Island, I agreed. Tilly said slowly. In fact, if it weren't for Scroll, they would probably have left Neverwinter. That's not your fault, Vendi comforted her. Heidi Morgan deserved it. She deceived the witches in the kingdom of Wolfheart. But it's also a fact that she helped Azima. Tilly did not seem to want to dwell on this. If it were me, I might also have a grudge. After all, they're not bad at heart. Well, Vendi pondered for a moment. I may have a way to persuade them, but what? It may help them get rid of the sleeping spell. That's no different from now, Tilly said frankly. If it's good for Roland and them, just do it. Is this really a good idea? After returning to the residential building, Doris looked worried. We've already offended Lady Tilly, and now we've refused the job of the Lord of Neverwinter. If we completely annoy him, I'm afraid we'll all. Several other witches from the eastern region echoed her words. I think Doris is right. Roland Wimbledon isn't an ordinary lord. He's now the king of Grey Castle. Even if we can return to the eastern region, it'll already be his territory. And we're not combat witches. Once he attacks us, we won't be able to resist at all. Come on, even if you can fight, can you defeat that lunatic Ashes? I bet she's been sick of us for a long time. Actually, I think the Witch Union is quite nice to us. Don't even think about it. They'll definitely side with the king. We'll be lucky if they don't help His Majesty arrest us. Stop talking. Azima interrupted their argument. Roland Wimbledon will never use tough means. Otherwise, the image he's built up will be in vain. If we agree to the recruitment order, what's the use of our previous insistence? In the end, we'll have to rely on the sleeping spell. In the eyes of outsiders, we're no different from other witches. While saying this, Azima felt a little conflicted. In all fairness, the Witch Union had helped them a lot in the past 2 weeks. They didn't bully them as she had expected, but treated them equally. Even the witch named Vendi had come to talk to her several times about the matter. Vendi's kindness really made Azima feel a sense of home, which she hadn't felt for a long time. But Azima knew she could only continue to be indifferent. She had a hunch that once she opened her mouth, it would be difficult for her to escape from the sleeping spell. Just then there was a knock on the door. Who is it? She turned around impatiently. You're tuning in to the Lime's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.